Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast, LDS Discussions edition. It's February 13th, almost Valentine's Day. I'm not sure if that's a yuck or a yum for today's episode. Probably a yuck. But today we're going to cover a really important topic. The topic is, did Joseph Smith have sex with his plural wives? And this is important for a number of reasons. We just did an episode with responding to Mormon historian and apologist Keith Erickson, where he tried to make the argument that many of Joseph's polygamous marriages, especially the polyandrous ones, or where the women were already married to other men, that he did not have sex with them. It's just a typical apologetic Mormon tact to try and minimize or downplay Joseph Smith's plural marriage or polygamous sex, while not acknowledging at the same time that every other prophet and apostle and man called to polygamy until polygamy ended around 1910 or 1915. They were all having sex with their plural wives and having babies. Why would Joseph be any different? But that's getting ahead of ourselves here. But the reason why today is really important is we are going to bring the receipts. We're going to go through all, 34-ish of Joseph Smith's wives, and we're going to give a rating, a red, a green, or a yellow rating for whether or not we think it's pretty certain that Joseph Smith had sex with his plural wives, probable or likely, but not certain, or we have good information or no information to think that he did. Really quickly, I have to say this every episode because many of you will be joining the LDS Discussions series for the first time. I believe this is something like episode 62 in the LDS Discussions series. This is a series of 62 now episodes where we start from the very beginning of Mormon church history and cover Mormon church truth claims in depth. And this series is best consumed in sequence because we build on past episodes and we likely will be referencing past episodes. So you can find the LDS Discussion series as its own podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and there's a YouTube channel or YouTube playlist called LDS Discussions under the Mormon Stories Podcast YouTube channel. And that's how you can kind of go back to the very beginning, catch up, and then watch today's episode. It's a very popular, many say it's the most important thing Mormon Stories has done in the past 5 to 10 years is the LDS Discussion series. Even people who don't like me as a host still like the LDS Discussion series. So we want to always honor Mike, who was the creator of the LDSDiscussions.com website. The first 50 or 55 episodes we did with Mike. Then Mike needed a break. And so we're keeping LDS Discussions alive. We welcome our live viewing audience. Today, we're doing something we don't always do. We're live streaming today's episode. We've already got Dan Vogel in the chat. Dan Vogel, famous, world-renowned Joseph Smith historian. Dan Vogel's in the chat. So he will be adding color commentary and correcting us where we get it wrong. The only other thing I'll say is that it's not just some Mormon church apologists that try to deny Joseph Smith polygamous sex. And I'll also say, as we'll talk about today, the mainstream Mormon church actually admits that Joseph Smith had sexual relations with many, if not most, of his wives, because they've scoured over all the documents. They have all the documents, and they would know. If anybody would know if Joseph Smith had sex with his plural wives, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's worth $250 billion and has armies of researchers to make sure and find out the truth. Plus, I think they would much rather Joseph Smith not to have had sex with his plural wives because it makes him, to some, it makes him look like a sexual predator or a cult leader. And so I think if anybody had an interest in Joseph Smith not having sex with his plural wives, it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And yet they now affirm that he did. However, what's probably most interesting at all, and to some disturbing, in 2025 is there's this growing movement of Mormon podcasters and YouTubers who are kind of neo-fundamentalists. They're kind of Mormon fundamentalists in the polygamous sense. They're basically going back and implementing revisionist history to spread the word that polygamy was all Brigham Young's, that Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy, and he certainly didn't have sex outside of his monogamous marriage with Emma. And it's a growing movement. I would say there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of active, faithful, believing Mormons that believe differently than the mainstream church and the Doctrine and Covenants and its main historians. And they just say, no, Joseph Smith did not practice polygamy. Brigham Young did it. He was corrupt. He sort of took the church in apostasy as far as polygamy goes. And, you don't have to have Joseph Smith's memory stained. And so today's episode is also a response to that movement as well. And so that's my introduction. I hope, really excited that you're all joining us today. We look forward to your comments and questions. I'm going to ask everyone at the beginning of this episode to please subscribe to this channel on YouTube or Facebook. Please like this episode. Please comment on it. Please share it. And that will help this episode get far and wide. All right, get shared far and wide. So without any further ado, we welcome back to Mormon Stories Podcast, Julia. Hey, Julia.
Hi.
Julia, you did the research mostly for today's episode. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
We're super excited because you always do great research.
Thanks.
Tell everybody just a tiny bit about you really quick.
So born and raised in the church. I served a mission for the church. I got married in the temple, left my marriage, came out as gay. I started a TikTok called Analyzing Mormonism, and it's been going for a while. Like, I need to get back at it. I haven't made as many videos as I would like, but yeah, so I just try to break down the church as in a historical way. Like, I know I'm opinionated and I have my thoughts, but I try to present things in a non, I don't know, just a very neutral kind of way. But anyway, so yeah, I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and then I'm here for LDS Discussions after Mike's great work. So yeah.
Excellent. Great to have you. And yeah, we do. Sometimes I say that we try to be as objective or as neutral as possible. Of course, we all have biases. And in these LDS Discussions episodes, they come out. But we try to be factual. I think it's fair to say this whole series is evidence and fact-based. And sometimes with a little bit of Jamie Dodgers sort of mixed in. So with that beautiful, elegant segue, Nemo, tell us who you are.
I'm the king of dispassionate analysis because I'm dead inside. That's how Mike would describe me.
Mike would be proud.
Yeah. No, I'm Nemo the Mormon. I do a similar thing to Julia. I analyze the church. I commentate on the church. I'm the UK's leading commentator, I think. Yeah, I'm an odd person in this space because I'm a Brit. But I bring with me a love of jammy Dodgers and other British snacks.
I thought as soon as I mentioned Jamie Dodgers, you would pull out a package and show them on screen.
No. Tonight we're on Doritos.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah, that's the snack.
But this show is not brought to you by Doritos, just to be clear.
No. But my blood sugar levels are brought to us by Doritos tonight.
All right. Well, Julia, let's get going. I should tell people we're going to have another episode, at least one, where we respond to Brian Hales and others. We're going to lay out the evidence in this episode. And then in the next episode of LDS Discussions, we're going to do kind of reactions to typical Mormon apologetics that try to downplay Joseph Smith's polygamous and polyandrous sex. So, Julia, take it away.
Yeah. So I just want to say, this is, like you've just said it, these are just the primary sources. And we'll do another one where the secondary sources. And I do want to say, just because you've talked about him already, Dan Vogel has 3 parts on his own YouTube channel called Joseph Smith and Other Men's Wives. And he goes and that's all he does is he's responding to Brian Hales or other apologists and why they disagree with some of the historical evidence and why he thinks that that's not the correct take. Anyway, so if you want to go ahead and just watch those 3, that's great too. And then we'll have our own part 2 of this doing the same thing.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
And look at that. I want to thank all of our donors. Donors make Mormon Stories possible. So I just want to say at the very beginning, thanks to all our monthly donors. Your donations allow us to pay Julia and Nemo and Gerardo and Margie and the whole staff and myself. So thank you. We're always grateful when you're on YouTube and you're able to throw us a bone via YouTube. We'll take it. Thanks to Kelly Sand, who says 3 of my favorite people, first time watching live. Hooray. And if y'all who are watching us live want to make sure that we see your comments or questions, just throwing a little bit of a super chat donation our way makes it so we for sure get to see and share your comments. Okay. All right, let's go ahead. Julia, do you want to start with the slides? Is that next?
Yeah. So the first 2 slides, we're just going over the scriptural basis for polygamy. So in the Book of Mormon, in the very beginning of the Book of Mormon, Jacob chapter 2, verse 27 through 30, they give the reason why God would command polygamy. So it says, "For if I will, saith the Lord of hosts, raise up seed unto me, I will command my people to live polygamy. Otherwise they shall hearken unto these things," meaning monogamy. So already the purpose of polygamy, should it ever be commanded by God, is to raise up seed. So if you go to the next one.
And for our Never Mormons who maybe aren't familiar with biblical terminology, Nemo, you know Old English better than all of us.
Yes,
What does raise up seed mean, Nemo?
Raise up seed means to have children, to raise up a generation of children or offspring, if you will. So really this episode is about how busy was Joseph Smith on Valentine's Day, 1843.
Also super excited to have Clutch in the house. Clutch has a great YouTube channel. He does great work, and TikTok and Instagram, called The Cultural Hall. But Colch says, really looking forward to this episode. Love John, Nemo, and Julia. Thanks, Colch. All right, Julia, back to the slides.
Yeah, so the next slide
So the Book of Mormon makes it
Mormon.
clear polygamy is to make children.
Yep.
Polygamy, make babies. That's the whole point. Righteous babies. Correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
ambiguous. Okay.
So the main Mormon scripture, that's the starter of the church, says the purpose of polygamy, should it ever be commanded, is to have children.
Make babies.
And
Okay.
the Doctrine and Covenants, there's section 132, verse 63. "For they are given unto him," meaning these plural wives, "to multiply and replenish the earth, according to God's commandment." So again, it's the modern scripture, or the I don't know how else to call that, contemporary scripture to Joseph Smith. They're saying if polygamy should be commanded, it's to multiply and replenish. So polygamy is set up with that perspective scripturally. If polygamy is commanded, it's for the purpose of having sex and having kids. So that's just the background that is probably
it's just
necessary.
so clear. It's like case closed. Isn't it kind of case closed?
Yep.
Right.
I mean, I guess the conspiracy theorists are going to say that Brigham Young implanted DNC 132 in the Doctrine and Covenants, and so that's not Joseph Smith. But how do they get away with the Book of Mormon?
Right.
Right?
Yep.
So that doesn't.
Well, and that's to your point earlier, John, where you were like, the church would rather Joseph hadn't had sex with these wives. And I think they would, but at the same time, I think that would make it more complicated for them to square the fact that DNC 132 is still in the canon of LDS scripture. And I think it's one of the reasons why most lesson manuals stop at verse 40 of DNC 132. They tend to not explore these latter parts because it's problematic to say it was for raising up seed, and then we have no verified children of Joseph Smith. So he was doing it wrong if he was doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's a comment from Bunny Watson, writes, "No children from these sexual liaisons." We may touch about this later, Julia, but that's one common thing people ask is if Joseph Smith was having sex, where are the babies? You know?
Yeah, that's absolutely a topic that's going to go throughout these sources.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what's this list?
So this is a list of the 35. So different historians count different numbers of wives. Like Todd Compton is one I really admire. He doesn't count all of these women. I think he only counts 33. Brian Hales counts more. I added the ones. I think this is Brian Hales' list too. So these are Joseph Smith's wives. Again, there might be more that have like lesser evidence. But yeah, if you go to the next slide.
Okay, so this lists 35 for those who are just listening.
Yeah, 35 wives.
You're going with 35 for today, right?
I'm just gonna go with 35. Yeah, I mean there could be 40, there could be 40 something.
And I would say I've seen the church itself say somewhere between 30 and 40, right?
Right, and yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so we go right down the middle, 35. Everyone's happy.
Okay, so what's this slide? Describe it.
So this is the same list, but now some of the wives are colored differently with green, which is like the symbol for me of like, yes, there is evidence for sex. So on Brian Hale's website, josephsmithpolygamy.com or something, these are the ones that Brian Hales acknowledges that Joseph did have sex with them. And so I say the church because Brian Hales, he like works for the church. He publishes things through the church. I feel like that's okay to say.
Yeah. And let me just say, for those who are never Mormon or new to this whole thing, when the church came out with its gospel topics essays, admitting all sorts of problems that they had been denying for, centuries, basically, they did have 2 to 3 essays on Joseph Smith's polygamy. And my understanding is Brian Hales was the first draft author on the church's polygamist essays. So we're not just naming some random apologist dude. We're talking about, as far as we know, the Mormon church's #1 go-to guy for polygamy. And he, so we know he's an insider and that the church views his work as credible. Do y'all disagree with that or have other feedback on that?
Other than to say the church could, if convenient to them, throw him under the bus and claim that he never officially was speaking for them when he said any of these things. Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, if you ask any of the apostles, they're likely to be informed by his opinion on these matters.
Yeah.
Also, Gigi in the comments says, "Where's Emma?" And I think that's a really good point. If you throw that list back up on screen, she's somewhere around. Well, if this is in order of seeing, she's somewhere between Rhoda Richards and Desdemona Fullmer, somewhere around there, I think.
I think Emma was like the 22nd-ish wife sealed to Joseph.
Oh, okay. I thought it was 27th, but
when with Todd Compton's where he dates things, I think he places her as being sealed as the 26th wife, if I'm getting my math correctly.
Okay, then Nemo's right.
But I think she falls kind of down there. But yeah, so she's not on this list. I should have added her. Emma is a very important. She's the only legal wife from Joseph Smith. These are just I only listed the 35 polygamous wives. But yeah, absolutely, she's an important character. I don't envy her life that she led, but I should have added her for sure.
Okay, but the summary of this slide is what, 10 to 11. The church already acknowledges.
Yeah, so the church says at least he had sex with 10 of them, and I will point out that all of these, other than Mary Herron, are single women. Mary Herron is a polyandrous wife. So a lot of people say, he didn't have sex with any of his polyandrous wives. So this list kind of leans that way more, except for Mary Herron's, but we'll talk about that too.
But either way, that's like a case shut and closed, right? If the question is, did Joseph Smith have sexual relations with any of his polygamous wives? Yeah, church admits that he did, including one of his polyandrous ones. Done.
And again, that's satisfying to believing Orthodox Mormons. Who it's not satisfying to are sort of these conspiratorial believing neo-Orthodox Mormons that now think that the church can sometimes fall into apostasy and that sometimes prophets can lead us astray and implement a terrible thing like polygamy, but somehow the church is still true. They might not care what the modern church thinks or just feel like it's okay. The church can get things wrong. The prophets, seers, and revelators in the church history department can all get things wrong and the church still be true, which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why it is an open and shut case for people who still believe in prophetic authority. And I'll just mention, I was watching a YouTube channel the other day of these polygamy deniers. Apparently, according to this YouTube channel, people are starting to get excommunicated for denying Joseph Smith's polygamy. And I had someone on Mormon Stories years ago that was disciplined for for some sort of question around whether or not Joseph did or did not, what was or was not a polygamist. Anyway, is that interesting?
That is so crazy.
It's come full circle. It's gone like, no, he didn't practice polygamy. We will punish anyone that tries to say that he did publicly. To now, you publicly denied the thing that we're now telling you. Out you get.
Yeah, and again, that's if the YouTube show I saw is accurate, but it's on a channel who we all know who the person is. I don't like to say the name because I don't like to spread conspiracy theories. All right.
That's mad.
Okay, next,
if true.
So this one I will acknowledge this is mine. You guys are free to disagree with me. If you do disagree with me, please put it in the chats, explain why you disagree. I would love to hear. So let me explain. So the green are the ones that there is strong evidence for. The yellow, or whatever color you want to, orange, are the women that are like, there may be evidence. And then the red are no. And then the ones that are underlined, I just did that for myself to keep track, because these are the ones that are underlined are polyandrous, meaning they already have a legal husband that is not Joseph Smith. So
okay.
This is
and so so it's the same 10. No. Okay. So it's more than just the 10 green that we saw on the previous slide, right?
Oh, yes, for sure.
So you're saying how many green about, Julia? I know I'm on the spot asking you.
If you go to the next slide, I might say it in there. Oh, no, I don't. Okay, so go back. So I might have to just count.
Okay, I'll count the yellow. You count the red, Nemo.
20. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So 19.
8. So there's 8 yellows where we're saying we're not sure.
Yeah.
How many greens where we're saying yes?
19.
Yeah,
19. So Julia's taking it from 10 to 19.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying 8 maybes. And then Nemo, how many are we saying no data?
8 no's.
Are the no's no? Or are the no's
or the we don't know?
Or we don't know.
Yeah.
So let me clarify that.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure all of the reds are we don't knows and not just strictly knows. But we'll go through all that evidence and we can talk about it. Because even off camera, Nemo and I were disagreeing on some of these things.
Yeah.
But we erred on the side of caution. So
Kelly Sam says in the comments, she sent a super chat. She says, disagreeing with Julia should be a crime, or then lock me up because I spent an hour before this show disagreeing with Julia to try and be as sort of credible as possible.
Yeah, Nemo, I think it's great. I think it's great for us when we're not like looking like too eager to overinterpret the data, in a way that makes the church look bad. I think that's something Dan Vogel and other good scholars do a good job of. And I love it that we're doing that here. So we'll just let people know we've spent time making sure we're as conservative as possible. Mm-hmm. And again, Julia, it's 21. We're 21. We're saying our yeses right now. 19 yeses and 8 maybes. Okay. And we're going to show the receipts, right?
Yeah. And again, if you disagree with my receipts, absolutely let me know and let me know why. Don't just
we'll correct. No. Yeah. We'll correct in a future episode.
Really yeah. So I just wanted to break it down a little bit what these 35 women look like. So there's 2 that are underage. So there are 2 14-year-olds that Joseph Smith married.
Is it fair to say, I know there are 16-year-olds. If he's 38, is 38, if he's 38, is 16 underage? I guess that could be a legal question, but it could also be a moral or ethical question.
So what's the cutoff you've used, Julia?
I just used 14 underage, but that's a really great question because is 16-year-old underage, especially if he's 38 or 40, the spouse, is 17 underage. This is just there. I'm just pointing out that there were, I think legally in that era, it is 14, that was the legal underage for women.
So 14-year-olds.
That's the number I used is kind of erring on that. So, and then women who were already married, there was 14 women who he married that were already married.
And for those who don't know the word, that's a polyandrous marriage. Yes. Polyandry is the word there. Marrying a woman, marrying a man marrying a woman who's already married to another man. Polyandry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And then I will say that I did add, I can always say this later, but there was one woman that she has a fake husband or a front husband for. So, but I counted her as one of the 14 because legally she is not married to Joseph. She's legally married to another man, even though her marriage to him happened after her marriage to Joseph. So, but she is counted in there. And then widows, Joseph married 4 widows. Well, I was told that Joseph only was marrying widows. And I was telling that on my mission, which is embarrassing to know that there's only 4. And then the single women, there are 17. And then that includes the 2 underage girls. So yeah, I just wanted to break that down to show what was happening.
And then I also like to highlight usually how many mother-daughter pairs or sister pairs Joseph Smith married. Mm-hmm. Dan Vogel's in the chat. He can let us know. But I'm also going to ask ChatGPT because sometimes ChatGPT knows. I'm stalling.
Well, so you have the Huntington girls, you have the Lawrence girls, you have the
Partridge sisters.
The Partridge sisters. So I think there's at least 3 sister pairs. If I'm not mistaken.
You're right. Three mother-daughter pairs. According to ChatGPT, there's Patty Bartlett Sessions and Sylvia Porter Sessions. There's Elizabeth Davis Durfee and Almera Woodard Johnson. And then there's Lucy Walker Kimball and Lorena Walker. So those are mother-daughter pairs, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know if I've counted Lorena Walker. She might be. There might not be enough
Oh, and it
evidence
says
for her.
possibly disputed next
Okay,
to
yeah.
Lorena Walker.
So I in my 35 and this in Brian's 35, these are the ones with the strong evidence. Of course, there could be like 5 more or so that are less, and so that might be why she's not showing up in this list. But
Okay.
yeah, so at least 2 mother-daughter pairs, if not 3, if we count this other woman.
Okay, and then sister pairs: Emily and Eliza Partridge, Sarah and Maria Lawrence, Lucy. Did we just say those? Lucy and Lorena Walker. Oh, they're counting Lucy and Lorena twice because
Okay.
ChatGPT doesn't know if they're sisters or
Right. Well,
mother-daughter.
and Presentia and Zina Huntington are sisters as well. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. So
All right. So
plenty.
what's that, Nemo?
So plenty.
yeah.
Enough to gross me out.
Kelly Sand wrote straight to jail, Nemo.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Although-
disagreeing with Julia. I will accept my
That is
punishment.
bad.
That's
That is
funny.
bad.
Yeah.
Also, thanks to Sally Osling, who's saying hi to everyone, that she loves LDS
Dan
discussion.
Vogel says 3 sets of sisters, 1 mother and daughter. And I would trust him on that.
My
Okay.
mother-daughter. With
Thanks.
Patty Bartlett.
Thanks, Dan Vogel. One
Okay,
mother-daughter.
I thought there was
who's-
2, but probably Patty and yeah, and Sylvia.
And
Okay,
is that gross? Is that bad? Julia, you're a woman. Like, how would you like to be married to a man with your sister?
I would not, but that's so common in polygamous unions. Like
Yeah.
it was very common. I don't like it.
How about being married to a man with your mom?
Yeah, no, I would not like that. We're making gross faces on the.
Nemo, how would you like to be married to your wife and her sister or her mom?
Your mother-in-law.
Yeah. Can we move on? Let's move on.
All right. Now we're going to go through them one by one. I guess we can assume Joseph had sex with Emma because he had children with her, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll
Yeah.
pass. We'll pass through Emma and go right to Fanny.
Okay, so I feel like Fanny is probably the most, I don't know, well known. I feel like a lot of people know about her. So Fanny, she's 16 years old. She worked with the Smiths. She worked in their home. She was helping Emma with their chores and things like that. And then in a letter written to Oliver Cowdery, or from Oliver Cowdery, he wrote that there was a dirty, nasty, filthy scrape, and then over top was written affair. And so that's one piece of evidence that there was sexual relations there.
And
William-
we know that Oliver Cowdery was excommunicated for accusing Joseph of adultery, and you can't believe in the Book of Mormon and not trust Oliver Cowdery as a witness. You just can't. So if Oliver's number 2 in the church was scribed to the Book of Mormon, and he says he catches Joseph in an affair, probably he did, right?
Well, I mean, people pick and choose what they want to believe.
You can't cherry pick him though, right? You can't say he's a credible witness to the Book of Mormon, but not a credible witness to Joseph Smith in the barn with Fanny.
Yeah.
Well, people do this. Apologists do that all the time, though. Like with anyway, we can go
They're
into
wrong,
that, but yeah,
but-
they cherry pick what they want to believe. Another source was from William McClellan. He once said that one night she Emma Smith missed Joseph and Fanny Alger. She went to the barn and saw him and Fanny in the barn together alone. She looked through a crack and saw the transaction. She told me the story too was verily true. And so it's not really saying what it is. It's very euphemistic. They saw the transaction. What does that mean? Was it a ceremony? Was it a kiss? Was it sex?
I think they traded a goat for a sheep. I think it was a agricultural transaction.
Sure.
I'm joking.
And then this last source comes from Wilhelm Will in his book Mormon Portraits, which has a lot of information in there. It's a very interesting book to read. But we hear from him, Joseph's dissolute life began already in the first times of the church in Kirtland. He was sealed there secretly to Fanny Alger. Emma was furious and drove the girl, who was unable to conceal the consequences of her celestial relation with the prophet, out of her house. So according to that source, Fanny Alger left the home pregnant. And then
maybe she just couldn't hide this light in her eyes at her newfound celestial glow.
Sure. But she pretty quickly married another man, Solomon Custer, I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this is the evidence for Fanny. I think it's very evident. She was kicked. She was removed from the home. Dirty, nasty, filthy scrape coming from Oliver Cowdery. We don't know. We can't really verify if she was pregnant or not, but just from this one source, and her maybe quick marriage to Solomon. But
my question with Fanny isn't whether Joseph had sex with her. It's whether it was a polygamous marriage, because the sealing power hadn't been given yet. The DNC 32 revelation hadn't been given yet. Like, I think it doesn't belong on this list because it wasn't a polygamous marriage. I think it was literally just a straight up affair that later the church named as a polygamous marriage to cover up the fact that Joseph was having sex.
That's why people are so desperate to try and disprove this. They're so desperate to disprove that he ever had sex with Fanny Alger because of the fact that it doesn't work with the timeline. And that's also why DC 132 in the top footnotes, it says, although revealed in, 1843 or 1844 or whatever, it says some of this stuff was known to Joseph Smith as early as 1831. Because again, we don't know the exact date of this affair with Fanny Alger. We know it was before 1838. Most people put it around 1835. So the church has just punted to 1831 to go, right, well, if we say that he was starting to get revelations about this sort of stuff as early as 1831, then he's covered for this to be a legit polygamous thing. I can't think of any other revelations where Joseph was having them continually for like 13 years before he decides to write one down. Oh, actually, no, maybe the first vision. Yeah, he waited 12 years to write that one down. So, maybe we can give him that.
I will say in one of the other episodes we talked about Joseph Smith commanded polygamy among the Native Americans, and I'm pretty sure that was 1835, which is when this Fanny Alger stuff would have been happening. So
it was 1830. It was earlier than.
Oh, it was earlier than that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, the Native American revelation came out like in 30
early.
or 31.
Okay,
yeah.
but still earlier. So like, if he's already got polygamy on his mind, so maybe that's one of the reasons why they're trying to make the date.
Oh, sooner, for sure.
But I can see why you wouldn't want to accept Fanny.
Yeah, that's why we recommend doing the LDS discussion series in sequence. Mm-hmm. We definitely covered that when Joseph Smith sent missionaries into the Missouri kind of territory and around there, he actually said, "Hey, if you want to pick up a squaw now and then, no harm, no foul. You're on the work of the Lord. They're only Native Americans. They're only Indians, the Lamanites after all. So feel free to pick up a squaw or two and call it polygamy." And yeah, Dan Vogel's confirming it was 1831, but he's saying it isn't polygamy really. It's sort of I'm guessing he's saying concubinage. It's just a little missionary action on the side with the natives.
Well, I will also point out, because the revelation was given to, I think, 7 men, and I think 5 of them are already married. So maybe Dan can explain what he means, because it does seem like polygamy to me if Joseph's listing these men out to take Native Americans. But anyway, so that's the evidence for Fanny.
Definitely sex with Fanny, but polygamy is questionable. But since the church includes her, we'll include her. So that's one down. All right.
Yeah. Okay, so Lucinda Pendleton married George Washington Harris on November 23rd of 1830, and then she married Joseph sometime in 1838. Again, this is pre DNC 132. So maybe you would also not list her as a polygamous wife, John, depending on where you want to make polygamy having happened.
At least they had the sealing power by then.
Oh yeah, I guess, yeah. But in an interview with Wilhelm Will in the same book, Mormon Portraits, Sarah Pratt says, and this is the wife of one of the apostles, she says, "When Joseph had made his dastardly attempt on her, I went to Mrs. Harris to unbosom my grief to her. To my utter astonishment, she said, laughing heartily, 'How foolish you are. I don't see anything so horrible in it. Why, I am his mistress since 4 years.'"
So not only is Joseph sort of being a sexual predator, trying to make the moves on Sarah Pratt, pre-polygamy revelation, right? 1838. Mm-hmm. But when she goes to someone to say, "Hey, Joseph's molesting me or attacking me," she says, "What's the problem? I've been his mistress for 4 or 5 years." So how do we know this is credible? How credible would you rate this account?
Well, so people say Sarah Pratt is not credible. I don't know that I've seen stuff from her that it was not so much. So I guess you could say, take her with a grain of salt, like with John C. Bennett. She's going to be spot on in one area, just like with John C. Bennett, and then kind of not understand fully in another. She might have listed Joseph as having way more wives than he actually did, just because she doesn't know.
But Lucinda goes on to Nauvoo, right? Or on to Utah?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Okay. I'm wondering if Lucinda did Lucinda say she was Joseph's plural wife ever? Do we know?
Oh, that's a great question.
Maybe Dan will let us know.
I just can't remember. Because I know some of the women left the church, some of them didn't stay. Some of them joined other religions, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't remember with Lucinda.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty good evidence for me. Nemo, what do you think?
Yeah, as we were going through this beforehand, I kind of said, people will try and argue some of these sources. Some people will try and say this person was antagonistic or this bit was a bit late. I mean, we have no reason to distrust this source. I can't see a good reason to not believe it. If a good reason comes up to not believe it, someone can let us know, and then we can change or we can adjust. But it's good evidence as far as I'm concerned.
All right. And I'm guessing the church lists her
Lucinda,
as one. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so
Louisa
Louisa Beeman is one that the church even acknowledges. Brian Hales acknowledges that they had sexual relations. And the testimony given with her relative, Joseph Bates Noble, in 1892, he reported that he married Louisa to Smith, and he said, blow out the lights and get into bed, and you'll be safer there. And he took my advice. Noble, under cross-examination, clarified that he did not actually see the couple get into bed, but that he, Smith, told me he did. There is no good reason to doubt that Louisa's marriage to Smith included sexuality. Noble further testified under oath. Question, where did they, Joseph and Louisa, sleep together? Answer, right straight across the river at my house, they slept together. So very clear to me, Joseph Bates Noble stayed in the church. He was also a polygamist. There's no reason why he would lie. There's no real reason why, if polygamy is set up for children, for having seed and multiplying and replenishing, why wouldn't they have sex?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think that undergirds this whole episode really is that the burden of proof is kind of on those saying that he didn't, given that the church has acknowledged that he did with 10. The underlying revelation states that he should have been doing it in the attempts to have seed and offspring. Now, quite why he didn't, we can get into whether that's an open shut case, all that sort of stuff. But, he should have at least been attempting to have children with these people. And so with that, plus the fact the church admits some of them, it's really the burden's on people trying to say that he didn't with the others to try and prove that he didn't. Because if there's anything that seems to suggest that he did, that's already in line with the other stuff we know that the church has admitted to.
And I'll keep this slide available as well. But this is the slide of which ones the church acknowledges, and the church acknowledges Louisa.
Yeah.
So there. All right.
Yeah.
So that's 3 down.
Yeah. So Zina Huntington. So Nima and I a little bit disagree.
Oh, wait, Julie, just 1 second. Two things.
Sure.
Sally Osling says, just want to highlight Julia looks quite fetching today, and not so much John and Nemo is basically what she's saying.
Well, thank you.
I'll accept it.
And then Julia, just to save your voice, let's take turns reading the slides.
Yeah,
also, you read so dang fast. People,
I know. I'm so sorry.
Julia reads too fast. So
let me explain. I have 14. There are 14 kids in my family. That might be a reason why I have to talk fast. You have to get it out really fast.
I think it's actually because people are putting it on 2 times speed.
Oh, maybe
because they want to get
Julia
through it.
On double speed. That's just incomprehensible.
Exactly.
Now me, you can put on triple speed, and it's fairly
fine.
coherent. So.
But yeah, Nemo, do you want to read this?
Yeah,
one,
I'll read this. Cool.
Okay.
But you were saying, Julia, we slightly disagree on this one.
Yeah, but I think as we go through Zina, we'll see more eye to eye. But yeah.
Okay. So Zina Huntington was the 4th of the wives. She was already married and she was age 20. Zina married Henry Jacobs on March 7th, 1841. She also married Joseph Smith in late October 1841. She was 7 months pregnant. Okay, right. She got to it quick. Once she got married, that's it. She fell pregnant. Looking at those dates. In an interview with John White, Zina told him, "It was something too sacred to be talked about. It was more to me than life or death. I never breathed it for years." In her biographical sketch, Zina also said, "When I heard that God had revealed the law of celestial marriage, I obtained a testimony for myself that God had required that order to be established in his church. I made a greater sacrifice than to give my life, for I never anticipated again to be looked upon as an honorable woman by those I dearly loved."
So this is probably where the controversy, because I see this based on the next slides that we'll see. This phrase right here, I made a greater sacrifice than to give my life, for I never anticipated again to be looked upon as an honorable woman to those I dearly loved. To me, that kind of speaks to this.
You invoke honor.
Yeah.
You're invoking sexual
if it was simply a sealing with Joseph without any sexual relations, I don't even know why even Emma would have a problem with that. I mean, unless she's going to struggle with polygamy in heaven, which a lot of women do. But like if somebody presented it to me that way, oh, we're absolutely not having sex, it's just for the eternities, I don't know that I would struggle as much or be thought to look upon with dishonor. So to me, that speaks to sexual relations between the two of them. But
in our recent episode with Sandra Tanner about Keith Erickson's bad apologetics, where he's deceiving people, we talk about dynastic sealings, where men, prior to 1890, Mormon men were sealed in the temple to other men. Nobody called that dishonorable.
No, yeah.
None of those men were worried about their dishonor.
Right.
So why would she be worried about a sealing only affecting her honor?
Great point.
I made the point of perception, and maybe it's because I'm a Brit and we
fair.
do backstabbing in society better than Americans. But just the idea that she seemed to be married to Joseph, even if nothing was going on, could besmirch her honor in the eyes of society.
Because they could see that, oh, you're having sex when she could think.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is it's not evidence that she had sex. It could be evidence, or all it is really is evidence that she believes she would be perceived to be having sex with Joseph.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fine. Although the next slides, I think
the next slides help. Yeah. But yeah, on that slide, I was a bit like, okay, I'm not sure that's evidence in and of itself.
Right. Okay. So this next slide, comes from Eliza Webb's book, Wife Number 19, and she thought she was Brigham Young's 19th wife, but I think she was in the 40s. Yeah, he had so many wives, but she wrote.
You want me to read this?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can read it. Yeah.
Let's take turns. In Ann Eliza Webb's book, Wife Number 19, she wrote, quote, "One woman said to me not very long since," and again, this is one of Brigham Young's wives, right?
Yeah.
She said, a woman said to one of Brigham Young's wives, while giving me some of her experiences in polygamy, quote, "The greatest trial I ever endured in my life was living with my husband and deceiving him by receiving Joseph's attentions whenever he chose to come to me." Now, how do we know that was Zina?
If you go to the next slide, it explains it more. But
Julie's ahead of us.
I will also say Ann Eliza and Zina were both wives of Brigham Young.
Okay.
So just so like this isn't just some random woman. Anyway. So yeah, the next slide.
Wait, are you saying that were both of them Joseph Smith's wives then, and then they both became Brigham Young's wives?
No. Ann Eliza was too young. She was born in Nauvoo. She's really young. In fact, Brigham held her as an infant.
You're speculating she was too young.
That would be really bad.
You're saying Brigham held her as an infant and then married her?
Yeah. So in her book,
Kimball has done that as well.
Yeah, it's wild. But her book is really fascinating. We've reprinted it. You can find it on Amazon with the original cover. Anyway, but yeah, so she'll explain. And so does someone else want to read this? I know I read really fast, but.
So Ann Eliza does not specifically name which of Joseph's wives she was allegedly quoting. However, her mother, Eliza Jane Churchill Webb, repeated the accusation in 2 private letters a year later, specifying that Zina Huntington was the woman. Eliza Jane's version of this account is, there are women living in Utah now who were sealed to Joseph while living with their husbands, and they say it was the greatest trial of their lives to live with 2 men at the same time. 4 months afterwards, she clarified, there is Zina, whose maiden name was Huntington. She says the greatest trial of her life was to live with her husband and Joseph too at the same time. Seems pretty solid to me.
Yeah. And again, like if this was just a sealing, why would we even speak of them living with 2 men at the same time? Or it being the greatest trial. Zina's story to me was really probably the hardest one to accept, just because how poorly Henry was treated, her husband who loved her dearly. It's just a really hard story. And she was 7 months pregnant when Joseph took her as a wife. Yeah, it's just wild.
Because it was a dynastic sealing. There's no need to live together. There's no need to cohabitate.
And also he could marry her brother. Like he could marry another Huntington. It doesn't have to be Zina, but it was Zina.
Yeah.
And just to drive it home again, this is, now that you've seen that evidence, this is one of the wives that Brian Hales in the church would not count. So I guess my point there is this is an example of the type of evidence that the church or Brian Hales would discount because it's inconvenient. But really, most importantly, we're not here to convince anyone of anything. We don't want anyone to believe us of anything. what we want to do in LDS discussions is show the receipts, let you, review these accounts. You can go now to the primary sources, and y'all can decide for yourself whether you think Zina Huntington, and we would really encourage you, go look at these sources that Julia has provided, think about it, and then come back in the chat and tell us what you decided. And we'll feel great however you decide, as long as you're basing your conclusions on the evidence and not just on, what some paid, apologist is arguing to save or rescue Joseph Smith's reputation. All right, let's go to the next one.
Yeah. So this is Presendia Buell. This is Zina's sister. She was the 5th wife. She was already married, and she was 31 years old. So she had married Norman Buell on January 6th of 1827, and then she married Joseph on December 11th of 1841. And this is a quote from Nelson Winch Green in his book 15 Years Among the Mormons, or I think he's quoting Mary Eddy in his book. Sorry about that. So Mary Eddy is saying, I heard the latter woman, Presendia, say afterwards in Utah that she did not know whether Mr. Buell or the prophet Joseph was the father of her son. And it could have been either Edwin Buell, who was born in 1842, or John Hiram Buell, born in 1843. It could have been either one of those. They were spoken of in the book. I feel like this is the only piece of evidence for Presendia, but it's really strong. If she's confused on who the father is, she's clearly sleeping with both of them. And I will say also that this evidence of people say Joseph had no children in polygamy. I don't think that case is closed. I have heard other historians say that is not a fully closed case, that they've done tests on some of the children, or some of the, what is that word, postulated children, supposed children. I think specifically only Josephine Lyon, and maybe Danville can correct me, but I think the only tests have been done on the Lyon family, and they did find out that one was not Joseph's child, but I don't think those have been tested on other posterity or all of the ones that could have been Joseph's. So I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah. So a woman being quoted as saying she wasn't sure if her child was Joseph's or her husband, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And again, we should note that both Zina, Lucinda, and Presendia are 3 of the polyandrous wives. And so that's interesting. It looks like 3 of the first 5 and 4 of the 5. Oh my gosh. How many of the first 10 wives were polyandrous? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Can we just make a point about this? 7 of Joseph Smith's first 10 wives were polyandrous.
So
it's almost as though polygamy started with polyandry rather than, do you know what I mean? It almost started as a.
Do I have that right, Julia?
Yeah. So I will say though that I've heard apologists say, oh, the reason he was marrying women who were already married is because he was scared. He didn't want to have sex with them. So he's just going to marry them and not sleep with them.
No, it's so that if he does sleep with them and a baby comes about, there's no scandal.
I 100% agree. And I know some historians are trying to move Louisa Beeman specifically because she's not polyandrous. They're trying to move her down later in the timeline to make it so that he is only marrying women who were already married. And I disagree with that. I've looked at the evidence. There's no reason to move Louisa Beeman. But yeah, most of the first women are women who were already married. And I totally agree with you, John. I think it's because he's trying to not have kids, or however you worded that. Because if he gets them pregnant, they have husbands.
He's avoiding scandal. It's 9 out of the first 12. That's so wild. I never realized it was 9 out of the first 12. It was 11 out of the first 17. Yeah. Like polyandry was the rule for the first 17 wives.
Then he got a taste for sisters around sort of 19.
Gosh, this is so disturbing.
Sorry, that was a bit crass, but you know what I mean.
That was crass.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
He did.
I don't know. And all this is why I love these series. I'm learning stuff. I just had no idea it was polyandry was the rule, not the exception for the first 17 or 20 plural marriages. Okay, we've made the point. All right, let's go back to the next
number
one.
6.
Number 6.
Okay, so I'll kind of summarize this one because this is a lot of information. So
Agnes Smith.
Agnes Smith was Joseph Smith's, Agnes is Joseph's sister-in-law, excuse me. Agnes married Don Carlos on July 30th of 1835, and they had 3 kids together. And then Don Carlos got sick and he passed away unexpectedly on August 7th of 1841. And Todd Compton says that in their journal on January 6th, Brigham Young wrote that he wrote a Masonic code. He wrote, I was taken into the lodge. J. Smith was Agnes's. And he says that the was is code meaning wedded and sealed to. And then from other sources, he probably married her on March 24th of 1842. And then if you go down in his journal, in Joseph Smith's diary, for January 6th, it says, truly this is a day long to be remembered by the saints of the last days, a day in which the God of heaven has begun to restore the ancient order of his kingdom unto his servants and his people, a day in which all things are concurring together to bring about the completion of the fullness of the gospel. And it is reasonable to read in Joseph Smith's diary that what he's referring to restore the ancient order is he's talking about the Levirate marriage, which means like your brother. That's what Levirate means. If you go to the next slides, these are from the church's website on what Levirate marriage is. Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Sure. So the custom of a widow marrying her deceased husband's brother or someone, sometimes a near heir. The word has nothing to do with the name Levi or the biblical Levites, but is so called because of the Latin levir, meaning husband's brother, connected with the English suffix ate, thus constituting levirate. This system of marriage is designated in Deuteronomy 25, 5-10, also Genesis 38, 8, is spoken of in Matthew 22, 23-33. It also forms a major aspect of the story of Ruth 4, 1-12.
Perfect. And if you go to the next slide, I just break down these verses, and I'll just say, if you look at all of them, they are all about raising up seed to the brother. So the idea is if your brother dies, you marry your sister-in-law, and whatever kids you have, those go to the brother. They're in honor of the brother. And so the firstborn which she bears, that's the brothers, raise up seed of the name of the dead upon his inheritance. So it's a very biblical way of like helping this deceased person still have seed, still have
yeah, because you give them his name and they are his heirs essentially, and they grow up to continue his line.
Yeah, so for me, him marrying his sister-in-law, that speaks, because it's a Levirate marriage and because of what he wrote in his diary, how this is like, I can't remember the exact words, but like a restoration of the ancient order of things. There you go. Restore the ancient order of his kingdom. This to me is speaking of sexuality. That's what a Levirate marriage is. It is to raise up seed unto your brother. And that's, I feel a lot of people have said that as far as this one. Anyway, so yeah, that to me.
But then the argument back by those who want to say that Joseph wasn't really having sex with his polygamous wives, which again, you can't really deny because even the church admits it. But for those who want to try and say no, that was a direct command from God as well. D&C 132 says he should have been raising seed and he wasn't. Similarly, this command to take a Levirate wife was so that he would raise up seed in Don Carlos's name, which why his brother sounds like a mafia member still gets me, even after all these years in the church. But yes, it's such a strange name.
Paul says we cut you off, Nemo. Do you know where Paul's talking about, where we cut you off?
No idea. I'm used to it. Apologies, Paul.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Nemo.
No, I don't recall. But yeah, that was my point. Is like, Joseph Smith, if you are believing the position where he didn't raise up seed, even though D&C 132 says to, then this Levirate marriage didn't necessitate that he'd be having sex with her either. That's why, for me, it's a maybe, not a definite.
Yeah.
Maven thinks it was talking about Zina that maybe we cut you off. Did you finish all your thoughts on Zina?
Yeah.
Okay. Really quickly, Dan Vogel corrects himself. He says there were 4 sets of sisters. He left one out. So
and that is how we do it. If you say something that's not quite right, you just go back and correct yourself.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult. Thank you, Dan. Church leaders, pay attention, please. That's how it's done.
Stephanie Taylor Ewing makes a good point. Polyandry maybe wasn't only about hiding potential scandal or avoiding potential scandal. It's this, I think the word's cuckolding idea, where polyandry can be about power and a way of putting men in their place or pulling rank and establishing authority over other men. I mean, I think that's what happens in the bonobo kind of,
Oh yeah.
primate kind of
Mhm.
stuff,
Mhm.
and why we are primates pretty much.
Yeah.
So, it would make sense that we would model behavior that we see in the animal kingdom with our closest cousins.
Mm.
I want to
Yeah.
share Sam Pinson's comment because Sam makes great comments. Bishop Sam Pinson was excommunicated after losing his faith. He and his family have a great episode on Mormon stories that everyone should check out. But he writes, I don't think I've ever encountered a Mormon for whom the question of sex in Joseph Smith's polygamy is actually relevant, and I'll say let alone problematic, because they believe that whatever God commands is right. In Orthodox Mormon morality, if God commands genocide, then genocide is right. If God drowns innocent children in a global flood, it is right. If God commands you to ask for a husband to give his wife to you, it is right. If God commands having sex with a 14-year-old, it is right. And if God commands Joseph Smith to have S, and it kind of cuts off, but I'm guessing he says sex, it's okay. So Sam, your comment got cut off at the end. I'll say, if God commands Nephi to cut off Laban's head while he's drunk and on the floor incapacitated in the first several pages of the Book of Mormon, that's how Mormonism's holiest scripture begins. So I think Sam makes a good point.
I also wanted to say, I'm really glad Stephanie made that last comment too, because I was worried about part of this episode. I was worried about because Joseph Smith, I don't think he did polygamy just for sex. I think he did it for a multitude of reasons. And I think it was like power. I think he was trying to you made the really good comments, Stephanie. I can't remember what you would have listed, but it was more than just sex. But sex is such a heavy topic. It's a controversial topic that I do think this has value in showing all the evidence just for sex. But I don't want anyone to think that Joseph Smith lived polygamy just for that. There was a bunch of different reasons why he did it.
A couple other comments that are fun. Lauren Helms writes, Mormon stories led me to chaplaincy school as a post-religion agnostic. Thanks for always providing a valuable information and perspective. Happy for you, Lauren. This is kind of gross. Dan Vogel shares, some of Joseph Smith's wives were already pregnant. Lucy Huntington Jacobs and Sylvia Lyons. I mean, I'm not saying I guess that
Mary
sex
Rollins
while
as well.
pregnant is inherently gross. It's not. But with someone who's pregnant with someone else's baby, maybe, I don't know.
And it just, again, undermines the raising seed argument. I know Dan said in the comments, doesn't mean necessarily straight away, but, it kind of like, why, if you're trying to raise up seed, why are you taking someone away from their husband? Because women can only have one child at a time and it takes 9 months. So she's clearly already able to have a child with that husband. So if we need to raise up seed, leave her to it. Why are you trying to get in there and make that your child rather than the father's child? Because that's the only difference.
Also, God, I don't agree with Mormon God's take on polygamy, because if you want more seed in the church, leave women alone. Don't let them. The women who are involved in polygamy have less children. Like, men have more children, but the women have less.
On average.
On average, yeah. So like, the more polygamous wives, the less children. The less polygamous wives, the more children. So anyway, I guess if God is just focused on the one man and his seed, then sure. But if God is focused on wanting to raise up seed, righteous seed, then leave the women alone.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's jump back to it. We're on to number 7, which is Sylvia Sessions Lyons.
Sylvia, to
it's
me,
Lyon, right? It's not Lyons. It's Lyon.
Oh, sorry. That was probably my mistake. Sylvia Lyon. Yeah.
Fix that.
Just take that off.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Sylvia to me is one of, I don't know why the church doesn't count her. I guess I kind of do because I've seen Dan Vogel's videos. But so Sylvia married Windsor Lyon on April 21st of 1838. And then she married Joseph Smith on February 8th of 1842. Josephine Lyon recalls Sylvia Lyon, her mother, saying on her deathbed that she is the daughter of Joseph's. Just prior to my mother's death in 1882, she called me to her bedside and told me that her days on the earth were numbered, and before she passed away from mortality, she desired to tell me something which she now desired to communicate to me. She told me that I was the daughter of the prophet Joseph Smith, she having been sealed to the prophet at the time that her husband, Mr. Lyon, was out of fellowship with the church. Sylvia was married to Windsor before he was excommunicated. Josephine was Windsor's child. This shows that Sylvia believed that Josephine was Joseph's daughter, and it is convincing evidence that Smith had sexual relations with his wives. Some of it got cut off. So Windsor was excommunicated on November 7th of 1842, 9 months later. So it doesn't line up what she was saying, because Windsor wasn't out of the church yet. So she was sleeping with both men if she thinks that Josephine was Joseph Smith's, whereas the DNA tests come back and say that Josephine is Windsor's.
And Fair Mormon pushes back on this and says, oh, it was, it relies on a deathbed confession. I don't know about you guys, but when my parents die, I am absolutely stoked for the stuff they're going to tell me that they won't tell me at the moment. All sorts of stuff's going to come out, I'm sure, right? Deathbed confessions are a thing for a reason. It's a time when people think, okay, something I've been keeping secret for a long time, I can now finally tell people because I'm about to be free of the consequences, or because they feel like they want to be honest before they go to meet their maker, or whatever it is, right? But it's a thing for a reason. People tell things that they've kept secret their entire lives when they're about to die.
So I don't normally put a lot of weight into names, but I will just point out that her name is Josephine. And if Sylvia thought that she belonged to Joseph, I think the name is appropriate. I won't say that's strong evidence, but it's something to think about.
Can somebody explain to me? I'll be honest, I have not spent time paying attention to or taking seriously the modern polygamy deniers within Mormonism. But can somebody explain to me what's that?
Me neither.
Yeah. But can somebody explain to me how a modern polygamy denier, specifically a woman, can take this account from Sylvia Sessions Lyon, where she's saying on her deathbed she had sex with Joseph Smith. She's literally saying it. Why you could just dismiss that and say it's not credible, or blame it on Brigham Young? Or what is she going to say, that it was forged, that Brigham Young had a knife to her back and made her claim that on her deathbed?
Or that it was a late account from Josephine, or a family story that was incorrectly told. There's a lot of different reasons the polygamy deniers, there's some of them that I don't know how they get around it. Like the Temple Lot case, we'll talk about those sources of these women saying that they slept with Joseph Smith. I don't know. I don't spend a lot of time listening to these polygamy deniers because they don't hold weight to me. But yeah, there's a lot of different reasons why.
Psychopomp says in the comments, if I can throw this up, they say, weren't Josephine's descendants genetically tested and proven not related to Joseph Smith? Yes. Ugo, whatever his name is, Italian.
Herrera.
Yeah. He looked into it and presented evidence that, yes, she wasn't genetically related to Joseph. But that's not the argument here. The argument here is that Sylvia thought Josephine was Joseph's. In order for her to think that, she must have been having sexual intercourse with Joseph. Otherwise, how else would it have happened? She didn't claim a virgin birth or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of disturbing. I mean, what would her motive be on her deathbed to say that to her daughter? A lie.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard other people say though that, she meant that because she's sealed to Joseph, that Josephine is sealed to him in the eternities. I don't think that's what she meant. Why wait till her deathbed to say that when it's innocent? I think that's silly to think that.
Good point.
Yeah.
All right. On to Petty Sessions.
No, I think you missed Mary Elizabeth.
Oh, there you go. Mary Elizabeth, number 8. Mary Elizabeth.
This one, I have a different take on it, but we put a no because of what we'll read. John or Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, I'll read it. Mary Elizabeth Rollins married Adam Leitner on August 11th, 1835. She married Joseph Smith in February 1842. The angel came to me 3 times between the year of 34 and 42 and said I was to obey that principle or he would destroy me. Mary Elizabeth was only 23 when she married Joseph in 1842. She would have been 16 years old in 1834. Joseph said that I was his before I came here, and he said all the devils in hell should never get me from him. I was created for him before the foundation of the earth was laid. Mary later commented on the polyandrous aspect of her marriage. I could tell you why I stayed with Mr. Leiter. Things the leaders of the church does not know anything about. I did just as Joseph told me to do, as he knew what troubles I would have to contend with.
I mean, that sounds sketchy to me.
Yeah. So
sounds sketchy, but I don't see any direct evidence there of her saying that she had sex with Joseph Smith or anything in there that actually says, you know, there's all that stuff about, oh, Joseph said I was his before I came here and all the devils never stopped me great. Cool, he was in love with her, but again, that doesn't necessitate that he had sex with her. I think I wouldn't want to draw out conclusions from this that they had a sexual relationship just based on his insistence that she would be a polygamous bride of his.
Well, and I accept that too. This last part where she says, I can tell you why I stayed with Mr. Leitner. It's because I did what Joseph told me to do, because he knew what troubles I would have to contend with had I moved with Joseph, is what I'm hearing her saying. And to me, that kind of speaks to like being a wife of Joseph. But you're right. There's no clear evidence that she had sex with Joseph, just that he was like in love with her or was possessive of her relationship with her. But yeah, so that one we put as a no. So
that was Nemo. Nemo convinced you to downgrade it? Is that right?
Well, like, I mean, no, he's right. There's no clear evidence of sexual relations. It does read that way to me. And if he's having sex with 10 of them, why not all of them? Why not? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just didn't want to make an argument from silence, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Really quickly, going back to Josephine and Sylvia, Dan Vogel tells us just the explanations that one sex denier basically says that it would have been prestigious for Sylvia to tell Josephine that she was a descendant of Joseph Smith. And so that was her motive, I guess, to lie on her deathbed and mislead her daughter. But I mean, maybe you can believe that if you want.
I mean, if she'd been living among Community of Christ, I would kind of get it more, or like the RLDS as they were at the time, because that was all about who's Joseph Smith's seed, right? Who are his children? They're the important people in that community. But if she's amongst the saints that have moved to Utah, okay, well, it's moved on to Brigham Young now. It's his show. And yeah, there is prestige in Joseph Smith.
People still revered Joseph as the prophet, though.
But I don't think there was anything really to get out of it in the way there would have been had she been amongst Emma Smith and the others in Kirtland.
Okay. And then Dan tells us that Brian Hills basically claims that she was a spiritual daughter, but not a polygamist.
Yeah, and again, if you want to, Dan Vogel does a great job on those 3 videos responding to these apologists. So.
All right, let's keep moving on. The next one is Mary Elizabeth Leitner. Is that right? No, we just did her.
So Patty
Sessions. The next one's Patty Sessions. Yeah.
Okay, so Patty Bartlett married David Sessions on June 28th of 1812. So she's one of the older women. She was 47 when she married Joseph on March 9th of 1842.
But Joseph would have been younger.
He would have been younger.
Probably 10 years younger.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. But still, that's not anyway. Patty Sessions.
What? Still, that's not what?
No, I mean, I think of that as being a big age gap, but like I'm in the dating pool now and I'm in my 30s. I don't feel like that's a huge gap. Like especially to think of sex. Like, is Joseph's like 38 or something in 42? Anyway, I just don't think that's a huge gap because it might, so Patty Sessions appears in Dan Vogel's list of wives with evidence of sexuality listed as yes. Dan Vogel's reasoning is that her sealing was for time and eternity, and such sealings for both time and eternity are admitted by Brian Hills to have included a sexual component. And so like outside of that, though, I haven't seen, maybe Dan has more evidence, but I haven't seen anything that specifically points to Joseph having had sex with Patty. Also, sometimes he married these older women. That's not that old, but sometimes he would marry these older women, and these older women would help for the purpose of helping these younger women to convince them of polygamy or to help them get ready or whatever to take Joseph as a husband. So there's other reasons why he could have married her as well, not for sex.
Is Patty Sessions down as a yes on the church's slide?
Let me.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so because I think Mary Herron is the only polyandrous.
So she's not down there, right? She doesn't count.
No.
But that's interesting because if Brian Hales says that if they're sealed for time and eternity, then there was a sexual component. Right. Why is the church not following that standard consistently and admitting then that she probably was?
Yeah, that's why I don't put a lot of weight into this, the time and eternity.
It's almost like that isn't shorthand for whether they were having sex or not.
Right. Yeah.
But if Brian Hale says it, it gives us reason to think maybe.
Yeah.
I hate to keep going back, but Dan's given us some good stuff. Yeah. So Dan basically says, this is good logic that going back to, this is Patty to Sylvia again and Josephine, he makes the point that it probably wouldn't be prestigious for Josephine to be known as a polyandrous wife, that might bring shame. So it's hard to claim that was about prestige. And then again, why would she be hiding it and only telling it on her deathbed if it was for prestige?
Right. Exactly.
That's a really,
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
really good point. Thanks, Dan. We should have just had Dan on the show. We should have
Yeah.
invited him as our fourth panel.
Send him a StreamYard link, quick.
All right. All right. So are we done with Patty?
Yeah, we're done with Patty.
Okay.
So she's down as a maybe. So the 10th wife is Miranda Hyde. And I will point out, I think I've said this on the show before too, but I go to Nauvoo pretty regularly, and Miranda Hyde, Patty Sessions, and Sylvia are all live on the same corner in Nauvoo. I just find that very interesting. So Joseph had easy access to these women, or close access, I should say. So Miranda Nancy Johnson married Orson Hyde, and he's one of the apostles, on September 4th of 1834. She married Joseph Smith on April of 1842. And then from a statement from William Arrowsmith, Joseph Smith slept at his mother-in-law's house, who was a Mormon, when Joseph Smith slept with, I'm getting my people wrong. Orson Hyde, slept at his mother-in-law's house. Oh gosh, maybe he is William. Joseph Smith slept with Orson Hyde's wife under the same roof. Sorry, that was a really complicated way of...
Can you just summarize again?
Nemo, will you take that?
Yeah, I will take that, absolutely.
This is when we talked about off screen and it was confusing.
So some man, we're not sure who, I think it means Orson, would sleep at his mother-in-law's, who is a Mormon, when Joseph slept with Orson's wife under the same roof.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So many pronouns.
I know.
Yeah. But long and short of it, essentially, this is where that meme comes from. The picture of Joseph Smith, like, that's a nice wife you have here. Shame if someone were to send you on a mission. Because that's what happened, right? Joseph Smith married Miranda Hyde while Orson was away opening up Jerusalem to the preaching of the gospel.
Yeah, he blessed Palestine
for
the saints. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a man claiming that he slept under the same roof of Joseph and sleeping with Miranda Hyde.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty solid.
Yeah.
And this one is, not acknowledged.
Yeah, they don't. The church, Mary Herron is the only polyandrous one the church acknowledges as Joseph having sex with.
Yeah.
And Miranda's also polyandrous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that seems like a yes. All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's go to 11.
So Elizabeth Durfee is the 11th one. John, do you want to read this one?
Sure. Elizabeth Davis, who had been twice widowed, married Jabez Durfee in 1834. In June 1842, Joseph Smith took Elizabeth as a polygamous wife. She would have been 50 or 51 at the time. While no evidence for sexual relations exists between them, historian Todd Compton tells us that, quote, Elizabeth helped Joseph Smith arrange new polygamous marriages, and was always the case, and as was always the case with Smith's polyandrous wives, she continued to live with her first husband.
Yeah. And we've talked about this in the past, right? These older women that Joseph would use to arrange the marriages to the younger girls, right? They're a figure that can approach these young girls and solicit them for this arrangement. So he may well not have been having sex with these people. They may not have been his type or taste. But he could bring them into the fold to then use them for this purpose.
Yeah, it could always be for the purpose of plausible deniability too. Mm-hmm. To say, hey, why would I have sex with her? You know,
throw a few older widows into the mix.
Yeah, like, see, it's just spiritual only. It's just celestial only. Look, I'm marrying an older person as kind of a cover. Mm-hmm. I will also say, unfortunately, if you look at like Keith Raniere of the Nexium cult, it's very common for cult leaders to have older women be the kind of go-between with the younger women that the cult leader wants to prey upon. That's a common technique. Mm-hmm. Keith Raniere did it, and others do it. It's a common tactic. Really quickly, there's a comment. Adams writes, off topic, can Nemo add another event for his Utah visit? Yeah, we're having Nemo to a special event in Utah when he's here, hosted by us, and it's sold out without me even notifying my audience. And so, Nemo, your audience is wants to see you, and it left no room for my audience. What are we to make of that?
Well, I think we should probably see if we can get a bigger venue, John, and see if more people can come to the party.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, all right.
All right. Well, thanks for that comment. Okay. Julie, anything else about Elizabeth Durfee?
No.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's go to Sarah Cleveland.
Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Sure. In 1826, Sarah Kingsley married John Cleveland, who followed Emanuel Swedenborg and was not interested in joining the church. Okay. So just really quickly as a point, Emanuel Swedenborg, I believe, is where Joseph Smith may have gotten the idea for the 3 degrees of glory.
We should absolutely do an episode on that one if we have.
So, yeah. Okay. He was getting another version of some of the restoration topics.
Make a note of that, Julia.
Yeah, I've already started, so
Okay.
we're good.
Joseph Smith took Sarah Kingsley as a polygamous wife before June 29th, 1842. Sarah was 53 or 54 years old at the time. Sarah witnessed Eliza R. Snow's marriage to Joseph Smith. This was normal practice for previously married wives to witness the Mormon leaders' new plural marriages. Sarah also served as the first counselor in the Relief Society. There is no evidence for sexual relations between Sarah Kingsley and Joseph Smith.
So yeah, while there's no evidence, there's still really like the Emanuel Swedenborg connections, that they were witnesses to other women marrying Joseph. So again, like this, what you were saying, John, about the older women helping with the younger wives.
Mm-hmm.
So no evidence, but very, very interesting for Sarah Cleveland.
Really quick, we had some of our viewers and listeners immediately mentioned Jeffrey Epstein and
Ghislaine Maxwell.
One commenter, Kurt Bradwill. How do you pronounce the first name? Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah.
She was not only one of his, I don't know, girlfriends or whatever, but she's known as one of the women that would help him get younger women. So thanks for sharing that. It's another example. JC writes, Mormonism arose in a time and place of social experiments, Oneida, Shakers, etc. From free love to celibacy, sex rules key. U.S. history is whitewashed, much messier and weird. In fact, this is why this Nevermo loves history. Cool, JC. So glad to have you in the house. Thank you for that commentary. Isn't that amazing? We have such wonderful Never Mormons that follow what we do.
Yeah.
It's incredible stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, I assume we can go kind of fast on the ones where we're saying no.
Yeah.
Here's a maybe. So this is number 13. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Delcina Sherman, she was the 13th wife. She was a widow. She married Lyman Royal Sherman in 1829, and then they joined the church. Lyman died in 1839, just a few years later. So they're married in 29. He died in 39. He was a close friend of Joseph Smith. And then Delcina's brother, Benjamin F. Johnson, who has strong connections in the church too, provided the sole evidence corroborating her sealing to Joseph Smith. He says, the marriage of my eldest sister to the prophet was before my return to Nauvoo in July of 1842, and it being tacitly admitted, I asked no questions. Delcina was sealed to Joseph Smith for time and was later sealed for eternity to Lyman Sherman by proxy in the Nauvoo temple. Being sealed to the prophet for time only could indicate sexual relations. But also I underlined the tacitly admitted, which why would it be tacitly admitted if they weren't having sex, if it was just simply connecting the two families. So I put this one as a maybe because the time indication and then the tacitly thing. And also she's a widow. I thought that was interesting too of maybe she was playing a role in helping get other wives. But
all right.
Solid maybe.
Yeah.
Solid maybe. That's number 13. 14 is someone whose name I would have heard growing up, Eliza R. Snow, not as Joseph's plural wife, but as a poet and, a leader in the church. Go ahead.
This is where it gets interesting.
Yeah. So there's a story here. I'll have one of you guys read it because this is probably one of the most interesting stories. There's a lot of people that say this story never happened. I disagree from a historical perspective, and I'll explain why. But Nemo, do you want to read this story?
Yeah, sure. Perhaps the best known account that would indicate sexual relations between Joseph Smith and Eliza R. Snow comes from Charles C. Rich. Charles C. Rich called at the mansion house, Nauvoo, to go with the prophet on some appointment they had together. As he waited in the main lobby or parlor, he saw the prophet and Emma come out of a room upstairs and walk together toward the stairway, which apparently came down center. Almost at the same time, a door opposite opened, and dainty little dark-haired Eliza R. Snow, brackets, she was heavy with child, came out and walked towards the center stairway. When Joseph saw her, he turned and kissed Emma goodbye, and she remained standing at the banister. Joseph then walked onto the stairway, where he tenderly kissed Eliza, and then came down on stairs towards Brother Rich. Just as he reached the bottom step, there was a commotion on the stairway, and both Joseph and Brother Rich turned quickly to see Eliza come tumbling down the stairs. Emma had pushed her in a fit of rage and jealousy. She stood at the top of the stairs, glowering, her countenance a picture of hell. Joseph quickly picked up the little lady, and with her in his arms, he turned and looked up at Emma, who then burst into tears and ran to her room. Joseph carried the hurt and bruised Eliza up the stairs and to her room. Her hip was injured, and that is why she always afterward favored that leg, said Charles C. Rich. She lost the unborn babe.
So the allegation by a totally credible pioneer founding Mormon who is known all over, let's just say Cache Valley, or I don't know if it's Southern Utah, Cache Valley, but I'm always hearing his name as like a really important founding Mormon pioneer, Charles C. Rich. He's saying that Joseph knocked up Eliza R. Snow. Emma found out, got mad, knocked her down the stairs, and she lost the baby. And go ahead, Julia.
I was going to say, maybe not found out, because if she's living in the mansion house, Emma, there's no way she wouldn't have known, unless her pregnancy was not as far along. But yeah, I guess
Charles
she's at least
was
seeing
saying
physical.
she was heavy.
Yeah, heavy. That added word makes me feel like Emma would have already known, and just couldn't handle it anymore.
Maybe it was seeing it in front of her face with the kiss was the thing that sent her over the edge.
Right.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. And you've got a video about this.
Yeah. So this is a video I made exploring the Nauvoo Relief Society Minute Book. I'll explain in the video, but it just makes me, because a lot of people discredit this story of Emma pushing Eliza down the stairs. I've been to the Nauvoo Mansion House. I don't know why people would say that that's not the case. I know Brian Hales in his book, he puts up the stairs from Joseph Smith's house and the Nauvoo Mansion House, and he's like, there's no way that this could work out. Her being pushed, him seeing Charles seeing this happen. But I've been to the home, it looks perfectly fine to me to have witnessed this scene. And then this video, I explore a little bit more of what's happening historically. So yeah.
There's a story in church history surrounding Eliza R. Snow and Emma Smith. The story is that one day after Eliza had moved in with Joseph and his wife, Joseph met Eliza at the top of the stairs. He looked lovingly into Eliza's eyes and kissed her. She was several months pregnant at this point. Then Joseph went downstairs to take breakfast. A few moments later, in a fit of rage and jealousy, Emma pushed Eliza down the stairs. The story goes that Eliza lost the baby, and she walked with a limp ever since. So the thing is, we don't know if this story actually happened. What we do know is that Joseph and Eliza were spiritually wed on June 29th of 1842. Then, on August 14th of 1842, Eliza moved in with the Smiths on Emma's behest. Emma needed help with children and the chores. From the historical record, it seems as though Emma and Eliza were dear friends. However, on February 11th of 1843, Eliza stops living with them. In her journal, she records that she took board and had my lodging removed to the residence of Brother Holmes. We do know that there was some kind of falling out between Emma and Eliza. One thing that I was curious about is Emma's attendance at Relief Society. Wouldn't it be awkward to attend as the president having pushed your secretary down the stairs? Or awkward still to be attending while so many of these women were secretly and spiritually married to your own husband? So with these questions in mind, I went and reviewed the Relief Society Minute Book.
The first recorded meeting in 1843 was in June, 4 months after Eliza had been removed from the Smiths' home. On June 16th of 1843, it was recorded that Emma was not present. On July 7th of 1843, it is recorded that they were not favored with the presence of our president. Emma's absence is recorded for the next 10 Relief Society meetings, meaning that during 1843, Emma Smith did not once attend the society that she was president over.
The next time that Emma appears in the society is on March 9th of 1844. And during the meeting, she read The Voice of Innocence, which was commissioned by Joseph Smith to proclaim that Hiram Smith was innocent of polygamy. And again, that same afternoon, Emma voiced the innocence of the church leaders in regard to polygamy. The next meeting was on March 16th of 1844, just a week later. Emma addressed the society and spoke against John C. Bennett and his spiritual wife system. She advised everyone to abide by the teachings in the Book of Mormon, which essentially condemned polygamy. And interestingly, she exhorted everyone in the society to abide by Joseph's teachings from the stand. And this was the last recorded Relief Society meeting for the next 20 years. Now, I don't know for sure if it was the conflict between Emma and Eliza that caused Emma's absence in the Female Relief Society. After removing Eliza from her home in February, Joseph went on to take 17 additional wives. So who knows? But I thought it was interesting. If you actually read the entire minute book, it really sounds like a dual purpose of the society was to help Emma figure out if Joseph Smith was actually living polygamy.
Yeah, that was so good, Julia.
Thanks.
But come on, I mean, we all know a Relief Society president that's just gone AWOL for a while, right? Or an elders quorum president, whatever. This happens.
But if you watch our previous episodes, you'll know that Joseph hid his first, I guess I learned today, 25 or 26 polygamous wives from Emma. She was sealed late to Joseph. And that you know, we do a whole episode or more on John C. Bennett and the role he played in this whole spiritual wifery thing. But Joseph and or Emma and or other church leaders engaged in overt deception, not just to Nauvoo, but to the world as far as the polygamy that was going on. They tried to blame John C. Bennett for stuff that they were doing, but denying, and to make him the fall guy. But ultimately, William Law, thanks to him, broke the story wide open with the Nauvoo expositor. And we found out from Joseph's innermost circles that he was practicing polygamy and lying about it, even to some of his top leaders. And that's why we say go back and start from the beginning, because we cover so much of this. But Julie, that was fantastic.
Thanks.
Thanks to Fred for the support. Also to Michelle. She writes, buy a cup of coffee. Is somebody yawning?
I don't drink coffee.
I do. I sure do. I haven't had my coffee today. Anything else you want to say about Eliza R. Snow?
So there's one more slide about her.
Okay. I don't know why. Oh, there we go. All right. Let's run the slide. Here we go.
Kenimo, just because we talked about this before, do you want to read this one?
Yeah. Okay, right. The most quoted statement dealing with Eliza R. Snow's relationship with Joseph Smith was made by Angus Cannon when recounting his conversation with Joseph Smith III. He, Joseph Smith III, said, I am informed that Eliza Snow was a virgin at the time of her death. I, in turn, said, Brother Heber C. Kimball, I'm informed, asked her the question if she was not a virgin, although married to Joseph Smith and afterwards to Brigham Young. When she replied in a private gathering, I thought you knew Joseph Smith better than that. I've done my best to read that in a way that makes it make sense, but I will go through and explain it. Essentially, Joseph Smith III is saying he's been told that Eliza Snow was a virgin at the time of her death. And then Angus Cannon is saying, Brother Heber C. Kimball apparently asked her the question if she was not a virgin, although married to Joseph Smith and afterwards to Brigham Young. And she said back to Heber C. Kimball, I thought you knew Joseph Smith better than that. I.e., come on, Heber, you and I both know that he was never going to let me stay a virgin. That's what that says to me in my best reading of it. But it took me a little while to work that out, because it's quite a weirdly worded thing. Right. And there's a lot of I's, and I'm informed that, etc.
Yeah. So sometimes apologists can take that and say, oh, I thought you knew Joseph. Like, I thought you knew that he wouldn't have sex with me. Again, polygamy is all about raising seed. This woman was single. Joseph would have had every reason to have sex with her to raise up seed. Again, I'll add, she married Brigham Young later, and they had no children together. In fact, I think D. Michael Quinn says that there's no evidence that they even had sex with each other. Mm-hmm. And again, so it's like, why did he marry her if they didn't have kids?
But also, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of the sort of syntax of this, Heber C. Kimball makes an assertion and asks if she was not a virgin, although married to Joseph Smith and afterwards Brigham Young, and she counters. She answers contrary to that. Her statement is, I thought you knew Joseph Smith better than that, i.e., I thought you would have known better than what you have suggested. True. I thought you would have known the contrary to what you suggested.
Why are you even asking me? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's clear that the way that reads is that she's saying, come on, Heber, you and I both know that's not the case.
Yeah.
Yep.
Happy?
Yeah.
All right.
Move it on.
Really quickly, Kendall, you get the coveted, Julia, you get the coveted Dan Vogel
Aw.
Nice Julia approval.
Aw.
I think that's awesome. Anytime Dan Vogel says good job, I think that
Yeah.
means a lot. So thanks, Dan. We agree. Also, thanks to Fred for his support. Kendall writes, Julia is a gem. Her research is simply brilliant
Aw.
and illuminating. How's that to get you excited
I
about
love
Mormon
that.
history again, Julia?
I love that.
The world wants you back, Julia.
Yeah, I need to. I'm
Not
getting
that
there.
you ever left. You did never
Yeah,
really
I
leave.
know. But
All right, we'll hurry. We're on to 15.
okay, so Sarah Ann Whitney. So this is the one with the fake husband. Oh, actually, can you go back?
Sorry, that was
Yeah, you're good.
okay. There you go.
Okay. So Joseph took Sarah Ann as a plural wife on July 27th of 1842. And 9 months later, she married Joseph C. Kingsbury, with Joseph Smith performing the marriage in April of 1843. Kingsbury was a pretend or front husband in this polygamous union. So it's becoming polyandry. The marriage ceremony between Joseph Smith and Sarah Ann implied that mortal offspring could occur. And so this is the blessing between Joseph and Sarah, or the marriage ceremony. I give you S.A. Whitney, my daughter, so this is her dad, to Joseph Smith to be his wife, to observe all the rights between you both that belong to that condition. I do it in my own name, and in the name of my wife, your mother, and in the name of my holy progenitors, by the right of birth, which is of priesthood vested in me by revelation and commandment, and promise of the living God obtained by the holy Melchizedek, Jethro, and other of the fathers holy commanding in the name of the Lord, all the powers to concentrate in you and through to your posterity forever.
Posterity.
Yeah, so it's talking about posterity. And then according to historian Todd Compton, the following month, Joseph wrote a letter dated, what is this month?
Something
April?
1842. It doesn't matter.
April of 1842, to the Whitney parents, telling them it was God's will that they and Sarah come and visit him. He even assured them that he had a room all to himself and told them to avoid being seen by Emma at all costs. And finally, he instructed them to burn the letter after reading it. 3 days after doing this for Joseph, he seemed to reward Newell with instructions to take another wife or wives.
It was May, by the way.
Oh, May. Okay, yeah.
May.
Thank you for that. Okay, so that last paragraph. So the first paragraph about the marriage ceremony speaks of posterity. Again, it's not a direct thing saying like they did have sex. And then that thing about the I have a room by myself, burn this letter, make sure Emma doesn't see you. That to me implies that that's one of the reasons that they're bringing her is for this conjugal.
Why? Yeah. Why would Joseph Smith say, don't tell Emma and burn the letter?
Right.
If it was
it's
just
an
a
innocent-
Because Emma's
Oh.
pushing people downstairs. That's why. It's for her safety at this point.
I'm just
no,
saying,
I mean-
like, that's sounding sexual to me.
I mean, yeah,
Right.
the reason I pushed back and said I think it's a maybe is
You're
because
a grumpy Brit. That's why.
I can hear the apologetic arguments like coming in loud and clear. And I think they have some sort of weight, i.e. the idea of your posterity forever. It's LDS theology. It's eternal procreation. It's having spirit children, right? Similarly, this idea that, okay, bring her along,
That's
but I don't
weak.
want Emma to
Nemo,
see.
I'm calling that weak. I'm calling that weak.
I don't want Emma to see. There's multiple reasons he could want Emma to not see. There's a lot there that suggests this could be it. There's nothing there that suggests that he definitely wasn't. That's why it's a maybe, but there's just not the thing there for me to tip it over and
doesn't
say he
meet the
definitely
Nemo.
did.
Doesn't meet the Nemo standard.
It doesn't.
I will
I
say-
wouldn't be willing to defend it in a debate.
Right.
as
Well,
a-
With Alex O'Connor and Jared
Exactly.
and Jacob Hansen. Okay.
I'll just say I think it was also Nancy, oh my gosh, Rigdon, who Joseph tried to make her one of his polygamous wives, and I'm pretty sure he instructed her to burn her letter as well, and she did not. So that's just thought that was an interesting.
Was that the happiness letter?
Yeah, the
Yeah, the
happiness
happiness
letter.
letter is the one
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
wasn't burned.
Check out that episode. If you see one LDS Discussions episode,
So good.
check out the happiness letter episode. All right. We have another one on Sarah and Whitney. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is written by Wilhelm Wilhelm. Again, we've quoted him a few times. And then he asserted in his book that Emma Smith, whom Joseph made lead a life of misery through his infidelities, had founded the Relief Society for the purpose of spying her husband. At least Joseph often said so. Elizabeth Ann Whitney, the second lady who had been seduced by Joseph, he seduced her daughter too, Sarah Ann Whitney. Sarah M. Cleveland, the third lady, was the same who, as I have told you, kept a kind of assignation house for the prophet and Eliza R. Snow. You know her. So this is just he's listing off people that were involved in polygamy, and he just lists off that Sarah Ann Whitney was also seduced. And the word seduced leads kind of implies sexuality.
But could also just be convinced into entering into this arrangement, whatever it was.
Which is why it's a solid maybe.
So it's a solid maybe.
Victoria Perry, thank you for the super chat. And she writes the history episodes are her favorite. So glad you like them. Thanks, Victoria. Okay, let's go on now to number 16, Is it Martha? Martha.
Oh, sorry.
Knight?
I'm sorry, you guys.
Okay. Martha Knight.
Okay, so she's a widow, and she was married to Vincent Knight in July of 1826. But shortly before his untimely death, he visited her, and he was like, "Hey, there's a woman who her husband died at Hans Mill, and I'm going to take her as a polygamous wife." And she's like, "Oh, is that all?" So she seemed totally fine with this arrangement of polygamy. And then within a month of Vincent's death, Martha was sealed to Joseph Smith in August of 1842. And according to Todd Compton, he says, "We know virtually nothing about Martha and Joseph's married life, what it was like, and we know little of Martha's life in Nauvoo from the time of Vincent's death." So not that it's a no, it's just that we don't know. Like, her whole life is kind of blank after this. And so that's why we say there's no evidence for them. But
okay, that's a no. Really quickly, interesting comment from It's Just Me. They write, "I'm behind catching up. In this person's opinion, Sylvia Sessions Lyon, I am convinced Sylvia absolutely had Joseph's child. Even if DNA ruled out Josephine, she, meaning Sylvia, lost a child right before Josephine was conceived." And again, that's speculation, but that's her opinion.
I will say, this is random, but as many times as I've been to Nauvoo and you go to the Lyon drugstore, they tell you about the children that she lost. And every time I've been there, the missionaries never mentioned Josephine. And I'm not exactly sure why, because she was born in Nauvoo, to my knowledge. And I just don't know why they don't ever explain her or talk about her.
She's inconvenient.
Yeah, she's inconvenient. And I just think I just have noted that every single time I go to the Lyon drugstore.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Let's go to 17.
Yeah. So Ruth Vos Sayers, Nemo, do you want to read this one?
We're over halfway done. Are we almost halfway done?
I think so.
All right.
In 1841, Ruth Vos married a non-Latter-day Saint, Edward Sayers. In August 1842, Joseph Smith was arrested for alleged complicity in the Lilburn Bog shooting. Joseph escaped arrest and stayed a week with Edward and Ruth Sayers. Don't let this guy into your house. In February 1843, Ruth was married polyandrously to Joseph Smith and continued to live with her legal husband. What her marriage relationship to Smith was like and whether Edward knew about the marriage are entirely unknown. It's like, yeah, this guy comes and stays in your house for a week and all of a sudden he's marrying your wife.
Okay, wait. That's a pattern that Joseph Smith has through most of these wives. He lived with them and then he marries the wife. It's all over this polygamy. I should have made a list, but that's all over.
And Dan Vogel says Vos is the exception that Brian Hales tries to make the norm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there we go. Yeah. No evidence that they were anything other than,
Okay.
Okay.
So was there more?
No. I'm just going
on to 18, Flora Ann Woodworth.
So I should have put in more information. But so he marries Flora, and then in his diaries, William Clayton's diaries, he goes through the days, and this is just me showing how often he's going to visit Flora. And I don't know if we want to read all these, but in these journals, in these diaries, William Clayton doesn't point, oh, they had sex. But he's going there. He goes there in May. He goes there in June. He goes there in August.
Let's read it. It's May 2nd, 1843, Tuesday. Joseph rode out today with Flora Woodworth. What the freak is Joseph doing with Flora Woodworth?
With a 16-year-old
single girl.
And then, exactly. That's so. June 1st, 1843, Thursday. Joseph rode in the carriage with Flora Woodworth, a 16-year-old single girl. August 23rd, 1843, Wednesday. President Joseph Smith told me that he had difficulty with Emma yesterday. I wonder why. She rode up to Woodworth's with him and called while he came out to the temple. When he returned, she was demanding the gold watch of Flora. What? Why the gold watch?
The watch?
Yeah.
I'll talk about that later.
He reproved her. He reproved her for her evil treatment on their return home. She abused him much. Does that mean Emma's beating Joseph, basically? or yelling at
Or
him.
yelling at him or whatever.
And also, when he got home, he had to use harsh measures to put a stop to her abuse, but finally succeeded. That sounds like domestic violence to me.
It,
I'm
it absolutely
speculating.
does to me as well.
Yeah.
So the watch idea. So I think even he gave Eliza R. Snow a watch, if I'm not mistaken, and I think that was sort of his way of sort of like a ring, a proposal ring. And some of the one of the watches, I think it's Eliza's, is still in the church's museum. They still have it. But yeah, so Emma sees that this watch is that Flora has this, and she gets really upset because I think she understands what that means. So I just thought that was a very interesting. And then if you go to the next slide, there's more days. Do you want to keep going with this? With this,
Yeah.
John?
Oh, there's more. Joseph's spending a lot of time. Okay, wait. Is this
Sniffing
different?
around Flora Ann
Is
Woodworth. Yep.
Okay,
Different.
same person. August. He's spending a lot of time with Flora. August 26th, 1843, Saturday. Joseph met Mrs. Woodworth and Flora and conversed sometime. August 28th, 1843, Monday. President Joseph met Miss Woodworth at my house. August 29th, 1843, Tuesday. President Joseph at my house with Miss Woodworth.
So Joseph's with Flora at William Clayton's house, is what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you conclude, while no evidence exists that explicitly says that Joseph Smith had sexual relations with Flora Ann Woodworth, why the freak is he visiting a 16-year-old alone so many times?
Mhm.
Sorry, those are my words.
Yeah.
His frequent visits to her and William Clayton's records, along with his insider knowledge of polygamy, could easily imply that Joseph and Flora were indeed having sexual relations. Isn't it worth noting that the Mormon Church hasn't released the full
Clayton Diaries.
William Clayton Diaries yet?
Yeah.
Why? Why is the Mormon Church hiding the full William Clayton Diaries?
It's a mystery.
Clayton's an interesting one because isn't it some of Clayton's handwriting as well that surrounds the Book of Abraham?
Oh, I can't remember.
And people try and say, oh, Joseph didn't write it, Clayton did. I'm like, Clayton also wrote sections of the Doctrine and Covenants. Like, this guy is clearly reliable in reporting on what happened. And I think that's why the church is now reluctant to release, because they can't just write him off as an antagonistic, uncredible witness to the events. So they're having to... I think the reason they've not released it yet is because they've not come up with their spin yet. That's the cynical part of me, but I don't think the apologists have come up with their way of spinning it yet, so they can't release it to the public until they've got a way of justifying whatever it is in there that's problematic to them.
Or they're not finished redacting. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Chuck...
because they redacted Wilford Woodruff's journals.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So Chuck KV makes a good point. He says, meanwhile, Joseph Smith slanders Nancy Rigdon for denying his sexual advances as being seen around town, while Joseph is seen around town on 8 different occasions with the 16-year-old girl being alone with her.
Rules for thee, not for me.
Yeah, he called Nancy Rigdon a whore of her mother's breast. He really,
And it was only because she denied his polygamous advances and talked openly about the fact that he made them, because he was lying about his polygamy and didn't want people to know. So that's horrific. There's no
Nancy's a
excuse for
freaking legend.
Yeah.
What's that? Nancy's
a legend.
Check out our check out our happiness letter episode. Summer Rain, we love you, Summer Rain. Summer Rain writes, I grew up being told Joseph Smith was a loving and attentive husband to Emma. My heart breaks for the trauma she and these other women went through. Thanks, Summer Rain. We need to have you back on Mormon Stories. Check out Summer Rain's Mormon Stories episode.
Okay, so with that being said, there's you had mentioned in one of the slides, Joseph could have hurt Emma, the abuse that she...
domestic violence, yeah.
Yeah, and then there was another, I found at least 2 sources that imply that Joseph Smith was abusing Emma physically. So
But there's also accounts that Emma may have wanted to try and poison Joseph. So it went both ways, right?
Also, as you'll see in the slides, women were afraid she was going to poison them. And so,
this is worse than Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. This is way worse.
They should redo the show, but with Joseph Smith's wives.
Yeah, you don't have to make anything up, you know?
Nope. Yeah.
Nauvoo Nights, and it's just all the drama.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to we're almost at 20. Emma Partridge, 19.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we want to set this one up? Because it's the Temple Lot case with Emily Partridge. There's a Q&A. Do one of you guys want to do the Q and I can do her part?
Oh yeah, for sure. Go ahead,
Okay.
Nemo.
Okay.
Wait, explain give a tiny bit of background on the temple.
Go on,
lot?
Julia. Background the temple lot.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm pretty sure it's the Joseph Smith III. What do I call that? The RLDS Church. They were trying to prove that Joseph Smith did not have polygamous wives. And so these women were brought in to testify.
Oh, Julie, if I could back up.
Sure, yeah.
Just because never Mormons or newly questioning Mormons will have no idea. So when Joseph Smith died, Emma hated Brigham Young and didn't want to go to Utah. So Emma stays behind in Nauvoo. Brigham goes to Utah, eventually admits polygamy, but Emma stays behind and denies that polygamy ever happened, which is mind-blowing. Because now she's lying and we don't know fully why, other than maybe she was just embarrassed and hated it. And it's the reason why her husband was ultimately killed. But regardless, when she starts the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with her son, Joseph Smith III, as the blood successor to Joseph Smith Jr., they start with the doctrine that polygamy was Brigham's thing and that the polygamy never happened. And so that's why the reorganized church is always trying to disprove polygamy, whereas the Mormon Church is forced to always try and uphold polygamy, even after it ceased practicing it. Now, where does the temple lot thing come in?
You might know more about the history than I do.
I think there's some contention over some land in Missouri, and I don't even think it's the reorganized church that owns that land today.
Yeah,
but regardless, subpoenas were being, affidavits were being collected. Is it? Can we just say for a legal matter involving real estate?
Yes.
Affidavits are being collected about whether or not Joseph indeed had sex with his plural wives, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Right. I'll do my best interrogatory voice.
So this is this an affidavit? This Q&A, it comes from.
Yeah, so Eliza's giving her testimony, and she's being Emily is being.
Okay, so this is Joseph's 19th wife being questioned in a Q&A as a part of a legal matter, a deposition. It's a deposition. Yeah. This is a transcript of a legal deposition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Under oath, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Had you roomed with him prior to the night after you were married the last time?
No, sir, not roomed with him.
Well, had you slept with him?
Yes, sir.
Had you slept with him before the 4th of March, 1843, their marriage date?
No, sir.
Did you ever live with Joseph Smith after you were married to him after that first night that you roomed together?
No, sir. Emma knew that we were married to him, but she never allowed us to live with him.
Do you make the declaration now that you ever roomed with him at any time?
Yes, sir.
Do you make the declaration that you ever slept with him in the same bed?
Yes, sir.
How many nights?
1.
Only one night?
Yes, sir.
Then you only slept with him in the same bed one night?
No, sir.
Did you ever have carnal intercourse with Joseph Smith?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was great.
I mean, that's under oath as part of a legal matter. Emily's faithful to the Mormon Church at this point, right?
Yeah.
And she was 19 at the time Joseph married her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how they get around that.
Yeah. And even if it was just one time, which anyway, yeah, she's
and
saying
so
yes.
This is one of the ones. Okay. Okay. This is important. This is where it sort of starts up again. The ones that even Brian Hales in the church acknowledges, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, single women, they're not married already. They're of a decent age.
So the next 6 are all ones, just so people have it in their mind. The next 6 are all ones the Mormon Church agrees upon, because how could they not? Right? How could they argue? Okay, so let's do Eliza Partridge.
So this is Eliza now. So Benjamin F. Johnson wrote in 1903 that the first plural wife brought to my house with whom the prophet stayed was Eliza Partridge, after which he was there with my sister Almira as his wife. So yeah, just another, she's staying, they're at a different person's house and he's staying with Eliza.
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Even Nemo was willing to concede that one.
Yeah.
All right. I'm thinking maybe we should have one of these polygamy deniers on and just literally go through this PowerPoint with them and have them explain away each one of these slides?
Sure, if you can just share the whole thing with them.
All right, let's go ahead and let's go on to the second slide with Eliza Partridge.
So this is Benjamin F. Johnson again. I'm pretty sure this is a year later. In 1904, he says, I saw one of my sisters married to him and know that with her he occupied my house on May 16th and 17th of 1843, which he had occupied with Eliza Partridge, another plural wife, on the 2nd of the previous month. So he's acknowledging here 2 different women, his sister and then Eliza.
Was that Miranda?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. So he's saying it was in my house. I was there, and the Mormon Church acknowledges this one. So
Yeah.
this is an obvious yes. Now 21, Almera Johnson.
Do you want to read this one?
Sure, go on, John.
In Almera W. Johnson's affidavit, this was a legal proceeding, dated August 1st, 1883, she said, quote, I had been fearing and doubting about the principle, this is how Mormons and fundamentalist Mormons refer to polygamy, about the principle, and so had he, but he now knew it was true. After this, and I wonder who she's talking about when she says.
I think she's talking to Joseph, that Joseph had doubts too.
I'm sure Joseph was torn up about this principle, just totally conflicted. I just can't. Please, Angel, please don't make me. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. Don't make me do it. Sorry. Back to Almera Johnson. After this time, I lived with the prophet Joseph Smith and his wife, and he visited me at my home of my brother Benjamin F. at Macedonia. And then it goes on to say, Benjamin said that on the 15th of May, some 3 weeks later, the prophet came, and at my house occupied the same bed with my sister. Wait, is that implying 2 women at the same time?
Wait, which part? The second part?
Occupied the same room and bed with my sister. No.
No, I don't think so. But there are other times. So hang on. For first note, so Benjamin F. Johnson's sister is Almera. So in the first slide, the slide just before that, it was Almera that he was talking about. There was another, I can't remember which source it is, but there was a man who went to visit Joseph, and 2 of his plural wives were there. I just think that's interesting. I don't know what that means. Joseph was he could have just been having dinner with 2 of them at the same time. But
what does it mean that Almera says she was living with Joseph and Emma? Does that mean Emma was okay with this sometimes?
Or that, because Joseph has the pattern of he lives with these women, whether that's at his house or he's at their house. And then he's like, in my view, I want to marry this woman. And then he eventually does. And so that could have been what she meant there. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Joseph's just got the worst wandering eyes. And that's coming from someone with a literal wandering eye. So I feel like I'm qualified to make that statement.
Couple comments. Shaylee. Hey, Shaylee. My friend Shaylee, she writes, loving this so much. Thanks, Shaylee. We need to catch up. Can't Pray Me Away says, thank you for all your work. Church history is often so disturbing. Makes me sad I believed it all.
Great username.
Thank you for sharing. Can't Pray Me Away. Claymore writes, didn't Emma at one point argue with Joseph Smith that if he could marry others, she should be able to marry William Clayton? I think it might have been William Law.
I think it was Law.
Yeah. Not William Clayton.
Yeah,
and then Dan Vogel responds and says, DNC 132, Doctrine and Covenants 132, which is Mormon scripture for those who don't know, hints that some man was given to Emma, but that the time had passed. No one knows who, but it is speculated that it was William Law.
And something tells me William Law wouldn't have been up for it.
Oh, William Law's interviews, he has so much to say about Emma. He did not like her at all.
Wait, what does William Law's consent have anything to do with who Joseph?
Oh, yeah, that's a fair point.
What does the husband's consent have anything to do with whether Joseph would have sex with the wife? Right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, consent doesn't seem to have an awful lot to do with much of this.
Dan Vogel corrects us. William Clayton didn't write in any.
I looked at this. So what I was talking about was in the church's essay, they described Joseph Smith's encounter with the plates, which was something that was recorded by William Clayton. But what the church misses out is a part where Joseph says, I have translated a portion of them and find they contain the history of the person with whom they were found. Right? Quite a famous statement about the Book of Abraham. So that's what I'm talking about. William Clayton wrote down that statement of Joseph Smith's. And obviously William Clayton is reliable because he wrote parts of Doctrine and Covenants as well. He was entrusted to write those down for Joseph. So we can't say, oh, he didn't record what Joseph said reliably. But yes, that was his involvement in that. That's what I was talking about there.
All right.
So always up to be corrected.
Yeah, we love it. We love our fact. Who in the world gets Dan Vogel as our fact checker? I love it. We should send Dan some money. All right. Next one is wife number 22. These are going fast because these are ones the church admits because they're so obvious. Lucy Walker.
So this slide, and then a little bit of the next one, she's answering kind of the question of why Joseph Smith didn't have children in polygamy. Nemo, do you want to read this slide?
Absolutely. Right. In 1888, Lucy also reported they, Joseph Smith's sons, seemed surprised that there was no issue from asserted plural marriages with their father. Could they but realize the hazardous life he lived after that revelation was given, they would comprehend the reason. He was harassed and hounded and lived in constant fear of being betrayed by those who ought to have been true to him.
And then in Webster's 1829 dictionary, the fifth definition of issue is progeny. So child or children or offspring. So that's what she's referring to. The sons, Joseph Smith's sons, were like, why didn't he have kids? And then she's giving the reason. He lived a hazardous life. He was harassed, hounded. He was living in constant fear. And also these things can play along with women. I was told that when I served my mission to not be surprised if my cycle stopped, if I stopped having a period because of the stress and the overwhelm of a mission. And so like these women are also dealing with this as well. So it's like there could be reasons why he didn't have children on the part of the woman, on the part of Joseph. There's a bunch of different reasons. I don't think just because somebody doesn't have kids doesn't mean they're not having sex. That's not what that means.
Plenty of sex happens in the world with no children.
Right. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. And also women in the 1800s, they knew how to stop conception. So these women weren't dumb. There was doctors. Even Heber C. Kimball, he says that he even was taught how to handle abortions and how to handle conception, or how do I say that? Birth control. So these women know what they're doing. They know how to take care of their bodies.
And if for those of you who are alarmed that we even would mention the word abortion in a Mormon context and particularly in a Nauvoo Mormon context, again, that's why we encourage you to go back to the beginning and watch the LDS Discussion series sequentially, because in the John C. Bennett episode that we did on LDS Discussions, there were abortions happening in Joseph Smith's Nauvoo, and that's not disputed.
Yeah, so the question, absolutely, John C. Bennett was performing abortions in Nauvoo. The question only is was he doing it for Joseph Smith? Which
we're not claiming, but
right.
He was like mayor. John C. Bennett was like mayor, co-president of the church. He was head of the Legion, chief justice. Like Joseph gave him every responsibility.
Right.
So it's problematic and probably likely, but we don't know for sure.
Dan Vogel's correcting me once more. He said that was the Kinderhook plates, and he's right. I've gone back and looked at my notes. It wasn't Book of Abraham's Kinderhook plates. I knew it was one of the things that Joseph claimed to translate that wasn't what he said it was. But yeah, no, it was the Kinderhook plates. I should just stop talking.
You should just give up, Nemo.
I should just give up. I'm clearly not having a good night.
Nemo's dropping off. Dan.
Yeah, Dan, if you want to take my place,
Nemo off.
Feel free. I'm just clearly not on my game.
I don't know if Dan's voice is quite as mellifluous as your British voice, so we'll keep going.
So if we can combine Dan's knowledge and intellect with my voice, then we're on for a winner, I think.
Yeah. No offense to Dan's voice. Dan has a great voice. All right. Do we have one more Lucy Walker?
Yeah, there's one more Lucy.
Okay,
Nemo, do you want to keep going with Lucy?
Sure. Theodosia Frances Walker Davis, niece of Lucy Walker, asserted in 1876, Mrs. Davis, daughter of William Walker, Lucy's brother, at Salt Lake, she says that Lucy Walker told her that she lived with Joseph Smith as a wife. Another woman named Agnes Cannon stated that concerning the lack of offspring born to the prophet's plural wives, all I knew was that which Lucy Walker herself contends. They were so nervous and lived in such constant fear that they could not conceive. An acquaintance of Lucy Walker, D.H. Morris, quoted her saying, I married Joseph Smith as a plural wife and lived and cohabited with him as such.
Okay, so yeah, we're hearing that she lived with Joseph Smith as a wife. They cohabited as such. And then they're answering the question of the children in polygamy. and they were nervous and they lived in constant fear that they could not conceive. So she's answering the question, like she's saying, yes, she specifically had sex with him or lived with him as a wife, and this is the reasons why more children were not conceived. So yeah, anyway.
I have to stop for a Broadway reference. Little E says Nemo clearly hasn't seen Hamilton because, dear Theodosia, what to say to you? Sorry, had to.
What are you talking about?
Have you not seen Hamilton?
No.
Theodosia is a character in the Broadway musical Hamilton, and I guess they didn't think you pronounced pronounced Theodosia hesitantly.
I
So
did.
clearly you don't.
No.
Clearly you
I've
don't. You're not familiar with
Hamilton.
one of the best musicals of all time. So shame. on
Is
you.
it? Is it now?
Hamilton?
Okay. Yeah.
How is Hamilton not a top 5 best musical of all time?
I'm not saying it's not. I'm
You
saying
questioned it. You literally questioned it.
I'm relying on you to inform me of that because I don't know.
You're not
You
a.
know?
You're not a musical fan. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, I like musicals. I've just not seen this one, so I can't speak to how good it is.
I think it's on Disney, the Disney Channel.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can
All right.
just watch it, Nemo. All right, that's your homework, Nemo.
That's my homework.
Go watch Hamilton and get back. Okay, sorry. Did I take us off track?
A little
You're
bit.
good. You're good.
Anything else you want to say about Lucy Walker?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, again, she's number
Pretty
22,
straightforward.
and
The church even acknowledges her. So
the church acknowledges her. Let's
Yeah.
go to 23, Sarah Lawrence.
okay, so I will say that this slide and the next one with her sister Mariah are the same because they're both talked about in these slides. So Lucy Walker acknowledged in 1887, I am also able to testify that Emma Smith, the prophet's first wife, gave her consent to the marriage of at least 4 other girls, Emily and Eliza Partridge, and Mariah and Sarah Lawrence, to her husband, and that she was well aware that he associated with them as wives within the meaning of all the word implies. Emily Partridge similarly stated, she, Emma Smith, afterwards gave Sarah and Mariah Lawrence to him, and they lived in the house as his wives. I knew this. And then Benjamin F. Johnson wrote in 1904, I do know that at his, Joseph Smith's mansion home, was living Mariah and Sarah Lawrence, and one of Cornelius P. Lott's daughters, as his plural wives, with the full knowledge of his wife Emma, of their married relations to him. And so I will say also, going into Nauvoo, everyone should go. If you go to the Nauvoo Mansion House, they show you how it was set up in the 1800s and how he had it was a hotel. They had little rooms. And so this is where clearly a lot of his plural wives were living. And clearly, as all the word implies, he was having sexual relations with them in the Nauvoo house, the mansion house.
Okay.
So,
I'm
yeah.
just looking up flight times to Nauvoo now from Salt
Oh
Lake.
yeah,
so
I think
see if
everyone
can
should go.
do a little
it's
trip.
Wild. Yeah.
Well, this one's pretty straightforward.
And so Mariah, again, I'm not going to read them all again, but it's the
Is
same.
it the same slide 2
It-
times?
Yeah, it's basically the same slide. But there's a little bit more for Mariah if you want to skip over. So Mariah's 19 at the time of their union. Sarah was 17. So, and then Joseph's in his late 30s during all of this. So yeah, if you skip one more.
Okay.
Okay. Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Yep. The case for sexual relations between Joseph Smith and Maria Lawrence is strengthened by the court hearing against Joseph Smith on May 23rd, 1844, where a grand jury for the Hancock County, Illinois Circuit Court indicated Joseph Smith is that meant to be indicted?
Oh, probably.
Joseph Smith for adultery and fornication with Maria Lawrence. In May, William and Wilson Law provided testimony that led to the grand jury indicting Joseph Smith for adultery and fornication. The first count claimed Joseph Smith lived in an open state of adultery with Lawrence on and before the 12th of October, 1843. Joseph and Maria were married 5 months earlier in May 1843.
Wait, I did not know this. What court was convicting Joseph Smith of adultery and fornication in Illinois while he was in? I didn't know about this.
It's
Yeah,
in the
the
Joseph
year
Smith
before
papers as well.
murder. What?
It's in the Joseph Smith papers as well.
Yeah, that's where
Which
I pulled
was
that from.
published.
Did y'all know this? That a year
Nope.
before Joseph's martyrdom, he was convicted
So
of adultery and fornication in a court?
somebody suggested, and I think we should do this too. Another episode that we should cover is Joseph Smith in the legal system and all these reasons why he was taken to court. And I just think that'd be fascinating. It would probably be pretty long because he was in court a lot. He was accused of a lot of things. So that would be a very interesting its own episode. So yeah,
Yes.
so that's Mariah Lawrence,
Okay.
an open state of adultery.
Is it Mariah or
I think it's
Maria?
Mariah. I don't know.
Because if we're going with musicals, then it's Maria, right? It's the Sound of Music. But, anyway, let us know in the comments.
I do have to note, going back to the Hamilton reference, Phil Clegg is saying that because Hamilton, I guess, disses a little bit the monarchy,
Why would he?
doesn't have the most favorable portrayal of King George. Phil Clegg just assumes, as a Brit, you wouldn't want to see it.
Is that Mad
critical
King
of
George?
What?
Is that Mad King George?
I don't know. Whatever King George.
I mean, we've had a few of them.
Oh, okay.
His song is my favorite in Hamilton.
So, we will mock our monarchy with the best of them.
But we're not. Are we allowed to, or we're not allowed to?
No, you're not allowed to.
Okay.
It's like when someone picks on your little brother, right? You're allowed to, but they're not.
Yeah, and Cheris wants you to return a report on Sing Hamilton.
I will.
You say, price of my love's not a price that you're willing to pay. That's King George.
Okay.
All right. Maria
Okay.
Lawrence.
Oh, we already did this one. So we're on Helen Mar.
Sorry, I'm doing too many things.
Okay, you're good.
Helen
So
Mar Kimball, 25.
So
This is possibly the most controversial one, right, Julia?
Okay, now we're off. We're off the ones the church admits,
in
right?
fact, the church, Brian Hales, a lot of the apologists will adamantly say that Joseph did not have sex with this underage 14-year-old girl.
This is the most important one because let's just, for everyone to know, she's 14, super creepy and weird. And this is the one the church is desperate to say there was no sex, right?
Right.
Okay.
John, do you want to go ahead and read this one?
Yeah. Helen Mar Kimball, she was the daughter of Heber C. Kimball, right?
Yeah.
And we should just say, by the way,
Who's the great aunt of Quentin L. Cook.
okay.
Oh.
But
She's the great
also,
aunt.
isn't this the couple where Joseph basically called Heber C. Kimball into his office, one of his top leaders, and said, I have news for you, Heber. I'm supposed to marry your wife, take your wife as a polygamous wife.
He did that with John Taylor also.
Yeah. And it's like some weird, creepy loyalty test.
The Abrahamic yeah.
Yeah. Because
Just the
Heber
way-
said okay, which is disturbing, not faithful, not inspiring. Heber said, okay, take my wife. And then according to the account, Joseph broke down in tears at his faithfulness and then sealed Heber to his wife on the spot. I don't know. Julia, what do you think about that story?
I don't like any of that. But again, like the loyalty test, I think Stephanie's comment earlier, he was testing these men to see how loyal they'd be. Yeah, I think that's absolutely one of the cases. And then he did the same with John Taylor and his wife.
But then I don't like how heavily Heber C. Kimball lent into polygamy later on. Like I tell this story often, but I think it's one that needs to be out there in the zeitgeist. The story of Mary Smithies, the first girl born in the UK into the church. Heber C. Kimball comes over. He goes to a place called Barshall Eaves up in Lancashire, and he meets with a family, and they have a daughter. And they want her to be married in the they want her to be baptized in the local church because they think otherwise she won't go to heaven if she dies, where death in childhood is common at that time. And he says, no, I'll bless her. And he blesses her, and he says to this 2-week-old in his arms, you will live to be a mother in Zion. 19 years later, she becomes one of his polygamous brides. So a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy there, I guess. And she did father some of his children. And that is in a book that's just on my shelf, a book that Quentin L. Cook held up and was like, this was written by the son of my great aunt, Helen Mar Kimball Whitney. I was like, all right. So yeah, Heber C. Kimball wasn't great when it came to this polygamy stuff either. So it's all controversial around the Kimball family.
So with if all that creepiness and weirdness and culty-like disturbingness stuff isn't enough, Joseph's not only going to threaten Heber to take his wife as a plural wife, he's going to now say, I need your 14-year-old. So go ahead, Julia.
Oh, you want me to read it?
Am I reading?
If you want to.
Oh, man. Okay, deep breaths. Helen herself defined polygamy. Quote, it was revealed to the latter, Joseph Smith, that there were thousands of spirits yet unborn. So this is Helen Mar.
Yeah, this is her
Right.
specifically. This is from the little pamphlet called Why We Practice Plural Marriage.
She did a pamphlet.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. This is so creepy, groomy. You get her when she's 14 and then you have her defend the practice. I can't stand that.
Oh, well, John, Rachel Muir makes a really good point in the comments. Don't say she was 14.
Oh, she was
almost 15.
a few months shy of her 15th birthday.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Rachel. That's great. Also, thank you, my dear friend Randy Bell, for the super chat donation. Randy and I had lunch yesterday. We love you, Randy. More cowbell, more Randy Bell.
Mhm.
Yeah, when the Mormon Church, people won't get the joke, Rachel's joke. When the Mormon Church came out with its polygamy essays and the gospel topics essays, it knew that it had to admit Helen Mar Kimball and address the 14 years age issue, but instead of just being upfront and honest about it and saying it's true that Joseph Smith married a 14-year-old, in the original gospel topics essay, they said he did marry a girl who was several months shy of her 15th birthday, as if that was going to make it way better, right? Anyway,
it doesn't say that anymore because they realized that it was stupid. Anyway.
All right. Yeah, so they changed that after lots of feedback. So anyway, Helen, having been groomed, is now defending polygamy. So, quote, "It was revealed to the latter, Joseph Smith, that there were thousands of spirits yet unborn who were anxiously waiting for the privilege of coming down to take tabernacles of flesh, that their glory might be complete, which makes this plural wife system an actual necessity." So that's Helen Mar Whitney on why we practice plural marriage in the Juvenile Instructor 1884, several years later. She also wrote, quote, did you want to say something, Nemo?
I was just going to say she's operating under the assumption that polygamy somehow brings forth more children, which we have shown to not be the case. And
maybe she meant more righteous children.
Maybe.
I mean, but that's weird.
Perhaps. And then tabernacles of flesh is a very Mormon way of saying bodies.
Yes.
Do we have any evidence that Mormon general authorities are more righteous than the average member? You know what I mean? And that their kids are more righteous?
I mean, I've never created 12 shell companies to hide my money. I don't know if you have, John.
And we know that there's a apostle, or some of the general authorities have been excommunicated. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been excommunicated. So as of all of us. So maybe we can't win on that one.
This whole panel.
I've certainly never made shell companies to hide my money from people.
Helen Mar goes on to write, Helen Mar Kimball, the principle was established by the Prophet Joseph Smith, and all who have entered into it in righteousness have done so for the purpose of raising a righteous seed. Well, that's what the Book of Mormon says. And the object is that we may be restored back to that Eden from whence we fell. And again, we got to make that point. If Helen Mar Kimball, who was Joseph Smith's 14-year-old plural wife, is here saying it's all about raising up a righteous seed, then she's saying it's all about sex and babies. Why would we assume Joseph didn't have sex with Helen Mar Kimball?
She therefore must be saying that from first-hand experience, no?
Right.
I mean, that just makes all the sense in the world to me.
So before you read it,
or she's admitting that she didn't enter into it righteously.
Right.
Right? Maybe.
Or Joseph didn't obey the Lord.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Julia.
Oh, if you pull up the slide, I just want to give a little background before you read that last paragraph.
Yeah.
So there's a woman that came into Nauvoo named Catherine Lewis, and she published this book called The Narrative of Some of the Proceedings of the Mormons. She published that in 1848, which is just a few years after Joseph Smith's death. So this is her speaking. So John, you want to read that last one?
Yeah. Helen went on to write, quote, I heard her say to her mother,
sorry, that was worded differently. So Catherine's writing this because she's hearing it from Helen.
Okay, so this is Catherine.
So Catherine's writing, Helen went on to say,
I heard her say to her mother, I would never have been sealed to Joseph had I known it was anything more than ceremony. I was young, and they deceived me by saying that salvation of our whole family depended on it. And you're saying more than ceremony implies sex.
Right. Like, I feel like that's what Brian Hills is trying to argue. These apologists are trying to argue that these are just ceremony. They're not actually having sex. But like she's even saying here, this is just a few years after his death. Catherine says, I heard Helen say this. Had I known it was anything more than ceremony, I would not have done it. I would never have been sealed to Joseph. So like that is a clear indication to me that it was way more than just a sealing.
And that combined with the other stuff she said about how it's her understanding that polygamy is about raising up children. And we even did, so what we did, just to tell people how we did our homework, in that first quote, it says it was revealed to the latter, and we put brackets Joseph Smith in. I made Julia bring up the source, and we looked, and we're like, right, so who's the latter? Who's she referring to? Could it be Brigham Young and whatever? It was definitely Joseph Smith. So this isn't even like out of context or anything like that. She is just stating that her understanding is, and the understanding of Joseph Smith, who she believes brought this principle to pass, was that it's for bringing righteous seed into the world.
Yeah.
And why on earth would she believe that about polygamy, having been a polygamous bride herself, if that wasn't her experience? How would she countenance the difference otherwise? How would she say, well, it wasn't my experience, but this is still what the principle's for?
Right.
It would have been, if she was being honest, she would have had to say something like that to distinguish between her experience of it and what it's meant to be. And she didn't make that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really like this comment Randy Bell makes. He says Joseph Smith lied to Emma and the world because he was not having sex with multiple women. Got it. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Randy Bell, great point. That's awesome. Thanks to another B for the super chat donation. Also, really quick, Eric Lofdahl writes, great program. We have an old song about a man who joined polygamy in Utah. The song ends with him moving back to Sweden due to his quarrelsome wives. So I'm getting, that's like a Swedish folk song. What is that?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up.
If you've got a
Can you
link
tell
to
us what
that,
it's
Eric,
called in
Yeah.
Swedish, Eric? And yeah,
Eric, we would love that. Thank you
we'll
for
get John
sharing.
to sing it.
Thank you for sharing that. All right. So that evidence is pretty strong with Helen Mar Kimball, but I can see why the church wants to fight it tooth and nail, because, once you start getting into the 14 age range, you start inching into pedophilia territory, which of course the church doesn't want a label. And I'm told that post post coming of age women, you don't use pedophilia, even if they're under 18. You don't say pedophile once they've had their periods,
they've gone
and
through
gone through puberty.
Yeah,
Is that right?
That's what my understanding is. So I would never label Joseph as a pedophile just because of that. Like, we don't know. Like, Helen she was 14. She probably had started her cycle already. And now I don't like these stories of Brigham holding an infant, Ann Eliza. I don't like Heber C. Kimball holding an infant and saying things like, not that I would accuse them of pedophilia, but I just think that, I don't know. It's just, I'm
doesn't
really
sit well.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It does not sit well.
But yeah, I think it is fair to say at times that Joseph Smith's behavior was predatory in a sexual way.
Yes.
That's indisputable. Yeah.
Right.
So Eric says it's an old song from 1915 recorded on a 78 record. Those of you who are young people don't even know what a 78 record is.
What's one of those, John?
Oh, it's just one of the earliest types of record discs that we used to play in before 45s and before, what was it, 33s?
Is that when you put a nickel in the jukebox, John?
Yes, it is.
Listen to the hip hop.
I'm forgetting what the size of a LP was. Like, not a 45. Is it 33? I'm forgetting my old stuff.
Are they sized in RPM?
I don't even know.
Like the speed at which you play them.
It's been so long. Oh, 33. Medium vinyl records. 33 was.
What has this show become?
Oh, something off the rails. Okay, let's go to Hannah Ellis,
We're
the
almost there.
26th wife.
Yeah, so we're almost there. So single woman, age 29 or 30. So in 1869, lifelong member of the LDS Church, John Benbow, signed an affidavit affirming President Smith frequently visited his wife Hannah at his, John Benbow's, house. So that's pretty much all there is. Like, of course, the visit it might not have been for sex, but it seems likely that it was. That's the purpose of polygamy. So
that sounds like a Nemo rejection.
Yeah.
Probably.
It was, because
that's a Nemo downgrade. That's a Nemo downgrade.
It says they were conjugal visits, right? He just visited her. We can't say.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So that's a maybe. The 26th. We got a check for the 27th. Elvira Holmes.
Yeah. So Elvira married Jonathan Holmes on December 1st of 1842. So she's polyandrous. She married Joseph on June 1st of 1843. So like less than a year later. On February 9th of 1838, just months before her death, 1938. Just months before her death at age 88, her daughter Phoebe recalled, "I heard my mother testify that she was indeed the Prophet Joseph Smith's plural wife in life and lived with him as such during his lifetime." So just a very, she's telling her daughter, yep, I lived with him as such, as his wife during his lifetime. So
Nemo, it was as such that prevailed for you on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's all it takes is as such, and then you're a convert to the.
yeah. All it takes
transaction-
is
to
for
the
someone to
transaction.
say they lived with him as a wife,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, that's quite clear in its meaning. If it's
All
like,
right.
oh, they were visiting all the time, or he was just sniffing around this 16-year-old, I'm like, okay, well,
that's why Flora was a maybe,
Yeah, was a
right? Wasn't she
maybe,
a solid maybe? Even though
Yeah.
Joseph was constantly at her house.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We
but
have
we
a
don't know what.
comment. We have a comment from Psychopomp who says a point that John has made in the past, which I wish he'd make again. We'll have you make it, Psychopomp. Is the misuse of this powerful gift of revelation reduced to gratifying Joseph Smith's libido? And it's not just that. It's not just Joseph Smith's libido. It's the fact that of all the genocide and natural disasters and bigotry and murder and war that has happened in the history of humankind, the only known instance of God, the Almighty Father, sending an angel with the flaming sword to force something is not Auschwitz. It's not World War I, the war to end all wars. It's to force Joseph Smith to have sex with one of his plural wives, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Like,
Sorry, it's not even the Black Death being like, hey guys, don't go near the rats.
yeah, like learn germ theory. Hurry.
Yeah.
Hurry,
Yeah,
learn
no
germ
kidding.
theory.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Like the word of wisdom could have been
Close
like,
together
wash
in
your hands.
London.
Wash your
'Cause,
hands before you do surgery, please.
Please.
No,
Yeah.
it's Joseph needs to have sex. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as such equals transaction for Nemo. That's good. So Elvira Holmes is good. We're on to 28. We're almost at 30.
So Rhoda Richards. So when she was 23, Rhoda fell in love with a man named Ebenezer and they got engaged. Unfortunately, he passed away. It was kind of unexpected. But then she joined the church and then she was later sealed to Joseph. And she was 20 years older than Joseph. So she's another one of those older women. In her later years, she recalled her life of loneliness. She says, "In my young days, I buried my first and only love, and true to that affiance, I have passed companionless through life. But I'm sure of having my proper place and standing in the resurrection, having been sealed to the prophet Joseph, according to the celestial law, by his own request, under the inspiration of divine revelation." So just this sentence of her saying, "I have passed companionless through life," that could mean that they didn't have sex. She said one and only love, so clearly she didn't love Joseph. Anyway, that was just.
She seems to be pretty clear that this was about her standing in the celestial kingdom, right? And if that's what she's saying, then I have no reason to not believe her. And also, it seems to follow a pattern that Joseph Smith doesn't tend to have sex with the older ladies.
Does not intend.
He does not tend to have sex with the older ladies. I'm not seeing any of the ones like over 50 as having been. Yes, we have evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's fortunate for the older ladies. I don't know.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you'd been having children with his other polygamous wives, you could even make the case that, okay, well, if they're past their ability to bear children, then of course he wasn't having sex with them, and he brought them in to support the younger wives who were having children and etc. Right? But just there was none of that. So maybe, like you said earlier, it was plausible deniability, or more likely, I think they were just part of introducing the principle to other young women.
Right. I mean, if the purpose of polygamy is to bring in seed and he's marrying women who are past childbearing years, he shouldn't be marrying half these women anyway. They're already married or they're widows.
Can we just pause and ask, try to put yourself in the brain of a 14-year-old girl on the frontier, 16-year-old girl, 18-year-old girl, 20-year-old woman. Like, you think you're in God's one true church. You think you worship God's one chosen prophet, like the chosen prophet of this dispensation, the man next to Jesus in importance. According to Mormons, next to Jesus, Joseph is the most important human who's ever walked the face of the earth. You're this 14-year-old girl living in who knows where, Illinois. You're vulnerable. Your parents are there. And you know that this prophet you're taught speaks for God. And then you're told God wants you. God has chosen you to be one of the prophet's special secret wives. You can't tell anyone, but you got to sleep with them. Can you imagine what that would be like? What type of spiritual abuse, what type of spiritual trauma that would be for a young girl?
Well, Helen in her journal, she talks about how hard it was. She couldn't like rejoin society as a single woman. She talks about how she was restricted and held back. Like her journals are heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Like,
that's why
too
I
often-
talked about being predatory earlier, right? It's the young girls that he uses the salvation of their family to convince to be involved in this, right?
Like sometimes I'm reminded that we're often jokey on these podcasts, and we laugh and we make jokes, and people call me on it, and I'm like, well, why are we laughing about something so horrific? Because this really is horrific, right?
Yes.
But we laugh and we joke, and the easy answer is you laugh and you joke so you don't cry, or it's just a psychological defense to not have to like swim in emotional trauma all the time. So I don't know if it's good or bad that we laugh and joke about it, but it probably is worth pausing to just note how serious and sick and disgusting and revolting and horrific all this really is.
Yeah. And that is encapsulated in the happiness letter. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can really see the pressure that he's applying to a young woman to try and get her to become involved in this arrangement.
Yeah.
And it's pretty horrific. And,
Yeah.
Think about the people in your life who are that age that you know. That's a good way to bring it home. Think about those who are that age that you know and think, what would it be like if you knew that a 37-year-old man had approached them in this way?
Who's claiming to be God's servant on the earth.
Yeah. On that cheery note, should we move on to Desdemona?
Sorry, I just killed the buzz. Keep going, Julia.
Actually, Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Sure, absolutely. I can pronounce this name. Desdemona joined the Mormon Church, in 1835 and lived in Joseph Smith's household in the spring of 1842, along with 3 other polygamous wives. Okay, yeah, it really is a pattern of them living with him. Desdemona moved out of the Smith home in May 1843 and boarded with William Clayton and his family. She and Joseph Smith were sealed in July 1843. Do you think William Clayton was involved in
Probably
talking to her about it? She gave a brief account saying, having been convinced of the truth of polygamy, I therefore entered into the order, but I dared not make it known, not even to my parents, for I was forbidden by the prophet, for it would endanger the life of Joseph and also many of the saints. Desdemona reported a night vision in which an angel told her that the polygamy doctrine was true. Later, she reported a dream in which she was warned that Emma Smith was going to poison me. I told my dream to Brother Joseph. He told me it was true, and she would do it if she could. Wow.
Yeah. So again, not a clear indication that they were sleeping together, but she's horrified. He says, you can't tell your parents. She didn't make it known. And then this idea, if it was just a sealing, why would Emma try to poison her? But Emma, yeah, there's a history of Emma. Joseph Smith thought Emma was poisoning his coffee. He was terrified of that. And like these other women are scared that Emma's going to poison them also. Cause
it's almost like all this sneaking around breeds paranoia.
Yeah. 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 Anyway, so a solid maybe, not a clear direction, not a clear indication that they were sleeping together.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Next
And
slide.
by the way, can we just note, if we look at prophets in the Old Testament, or even in the New Testament, some of the apostles, isn't it a hallmark of prophets, whether it's Abinadi or Samuel the Lamanite or Moses, where when you've got a teaching from God, you're willing to stand on the wall and face the slings or the arrows, or in Abinadi's case, the fire, to stand up for something that pisses a lot of people off or that's really disturbing. Like, isn't that what defines a prophet? And
Yeah.
yet, so why, if Lehi will stand up for what he believed, and Abinadi gets burned for what he believes, and Samuel the Lamanite will face the arrows for what he believes, why is Joseph Smith getting off by lying and hiding things?
Well, it's worse because the church.
And why won't God protect him? Why won't God protect Joseph if God's commanding Joseph with the flaming sword to have sex with teenagers? Why isn't God protecting Joseph from his enemies? Go ahead, Nemo.
And why is God revealing to, because surely we pray about who we call into certain positions, right? So why is God telling him that William Law's the guy that should be on his first presidency, who's then going to turn around and expose all this in a chain of events that leads to Joseph's death, right? That was a bad hiring decision.
Or to a lesser extent, John C. Bennett.
And John C.
Yeah.
Bennett also, who he really let into the circle. It strikes me, though, that the church gets to have it both ways, because they get to point to the tarring and feathering of Joseph Smith. They get to point to things like Horns Mill and all the persecution of the saints to say, look, this is us just trying to live our religion and getting persecuted for it. But at the same time, they also get to say, well, of course, Joseph tried to hide it because he was trying to protect the saints and he was trying to protect himself. And all this stuff. I'm like, well, which is it? Were the saints bold in proclaiming their religion and then took the slings and arrows for it and took the persecution? Or were they trying to hide certain things and not really being great at hiding them? And when people found out, people then got angry at them and tried to chase them out of town. Because, like, we don't want this guy taking our daughters or whatever it is. They get to try and paint it both ways, but I don't think it works.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I want to ask everyone to please subscribe to the Mormon Stories Podcast YouTube channel. While you're at it, subscribe to Nemo the Mormon YouTube channel and Analyzing Mormonism YouTube channel. Also, subscribe to us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you do. I want to thank our donors, and I just want to let everyone know. Also, please like the episode. Please comment on it. But also, we aren't able to do these podcasts without your donations. Thanks to all our monthly donors that pay the bills for us. We lose donors every month. So if you value this LDS discussion series, if you value Mormon Stories and you want to see it continue, we really need your support. So please go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor, and we'll be able to keep doing this stuff. Really quickly, there's a couple other comments. Can't Pray Me Away, we love that name, says, thanks. It is important to pause and hold space for the women who suffered. Thank you for mentioning that. Can't Pray Me Away. King Daho says Joseph Smith's polygamous sex must be viewed in context of Joseph Smith being a con man, malignant narcissist who did polygamy and Book of Mormon for his immediate prurient interests. Thank you for that comment. Lazy Learner says, yes, please do an episode on the legal system and Joseph Smith. So we've got a vote for that. A couple others are coming in. The Sandy Stone writes, Joseph Smith and Emma were not sealed to children. Emma, with lost children, would have welcomed that. The only aspect of sealing Emma ever knew was Joseph Smith's sexual escapade. You were at escapade. I'm going to say escapades.
That is tragic.
Yeah, totally. So thank you, the Sandy Stone, for those comments.
Can I say to people, you may have noticed I've been, chomping away. It's that time of night here in the UK where I'm getting hungry. So I want to turn this into a little bit of a game. Every time you see me pop a Dorito in my mouth, please like the video.
I love it.
So every time you see me do that, just hit that like button. All right.
Just mute. Don't chomp in my ear. You got to mute. Thank you, Nemo. One more comment. Psycho Pomp writes, we're not laughing at the suffering and abuse. We're laughing non-humorously to point out the absurdity and audacity of the abuse and people turning a blind eye to something obviously horrible. And I would say offering ridiculous apologetics and excuses for abusive behavior. Mormon Church, Mormon apologists, just say Joseph Smith, be like Patrick Mason. You're probably most credible and notable active scholar, because Richard Bushman, even Richard Bushman has said that Joseph Smith's polygamy is disturbing to him. But Patrick Mason came on Mormon Stories and said that to him, Joseph Smith's polygamy looked a lot like sin. Just be courageous and call it out for what it is. Stop making ridiculous excuses and trying to deny the facts and the evidence. It's just so cringy. And but most importantly, it's like being complicit. It's like being a perpetrator to try and cover up abuse. That's what we call it complicity, right? Somebody that takes part in abuse. All right, are we on 30 Olive Frost? Is that where we are?
So Olive G. Frost.
We're on the home stretch.
Yeah, we've got a few more left. So Olive would have been around 27 or 28. So within months after reaching Nauvoo, 27-year-old Olive Frost became a plural wife of Joseph Smith. And Marianne tells the story, it was at this time in the summer of 1843 that the principle of plurality of wives was taught to her. She never opposed it, and as in the case of baptism, soon accepted it to her creed in practice as well as in theory. She was married for time and all eternity to Joseph Smith sometime previous to his death and martyrdom. In a journal entry written in 1902 by a church member named Joseph E. Robinson, he records that Joseph said he married Olive Frost, who had a child by him, and that both died. This, however, is contradicted by another statement given by James Whitehead in 1885 that says that Olive died in childbirth, but more than 10 months after Joseph's death. Todd Compton mentions only that she died of a bout of common Nauvoo, what is that? Malaria. So it's just sickness in Nauvoo. Compton also states that absolutely nothing is known of what Olive's married life with Smith was like, and that we do know from an account of her grief at his death that she was deeply attached to him. So there's time and eternity. Somebody says that she had a child by him, and then that was contradicted because somebody else said she died, or the child was later after Joseph Smith's death. And then
Julia
Compton
won
says
this fight. Sorry, Karen.
And then Compton says that we don't really know. She died of malaria, and we don't know anything about their relationship here. So, but again, it was her creed. The time and eternity incident, or the time and eternity with Hales, where he says that if it's both, then that implies sex. And then also this had to be a child by him. So, yeah, but we don't know. I don't know if there's anything true now.
I was going solid maybe on this one.
Solid maybe.
Solid maybe, but
I'm glad Julia prevailed in at least one tussle with me. But we'll let the viewers and listeners ultimately decide whether they're
and I can see where you're coming from, Nemo, too, because like there's 3 different stories about this, and but yeah.
There are a couple important people in the house. It's fun. I'll just note Julie Diazevedo-Hanks has joined us.
Hey,
Julia, we all love you. We're big fans. Julie and Margie and I got to see each other for a minute yesterday. And Julia, we're glad you've joined us. And also the Bishop's Interview, which is Bishop Hinckley, who has a really cool, interesting new YouTube channel. Check out the Bishop's Interview on YouTube. He's a new up and coming YouTuber. He's been on Mormon Stories, pretty sure. My mind gets foggy when I'm put on the spot. But anyway, Nathan Hinckley's awesome.
Oh yeah, Nathan's been on. Yeah.
Glad you're joining us. Nathan's been on. Okay, let's go to 31. Malissa Lott.
Do we want to set this one up like the Q&A part?
Yeah. I can do it this time.
Do you want to do the voice, John?
Yeah, I'll do it this time.
Okay, so during the Temple Lot case in 1892, Melissa was questioned concerning her and Joseph's relationship, and I'll have John ask the questions and I'll answer.
So this is another Temple Lot. This is a transcript from a deposition in a legal proceeding. Is that right?
Yeah.
So sworn under oath by a faithful Mormon woman who was married to Joseph Smith. So I'm the inquisitor. There was not any children born to you by Joseph Smith.
No, sir. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that was a question.
No, sir.
Have you ever borne any children since that time?
Yes, sir, I have.
State now the reason why you never bore any children by Joseph Smith.
Well, that is something impossible to do. That is something I can't tell.
Meaning it's impossible to know why, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Question. Now you said there were no children born of that marriage to Joseph Smith.
And I said I had none.
You had none by Joseph Smith?
Yes, sir. And you asked me why I hadn't any, and I told you I couldn't tell you. That you would have to go to some higher authority than I to tell you that.
Did you ever room with Joseph Smith as his wife?
Yes, sir.
At what place?
At Nauvoo.
What place in Nauvoo?
The Nauvoo mansion.
And that's where Joseph and Emma lived. That's my editorial. Okay, question. At what place in the mansion?
Do you know the number of room? Do you want to know the number of room or what?
I wonder if she's getting sassy there.
Right.
It's like room 12. All right. So she's like in the kitchen. It was in the guest room, in the mud quarters, like in the bar. We did it on the bar once.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I mean, what a ridiculous question.
Well, she says yeah.
I mean, maybe not. Maybe he's trying to make sure she's not lying. All right. Sorry, we broke out of character. Well, just what part of the house the room was in, if you can give it.
Well, I can give it and the number of the room too. I was in room number 1.
Oh my gosh. Room number 1?
Yes, sir.
Who else roomed there?
I don't know of anyone.
So you roomed with him, Joseph Smith, in the Nauvoo mansion in room number 1?
Yes, sir.
How often did you room there with him?
Well, that is something I can't tell you.
In other words, so many times I can't remember the number, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, was it more than once?
Yes, sir, and more than twice. And then it keeps going on the next slide.
Okay. Did you ever room with Joseph Smith at any other place or places than at the Nauvoo mansion and your father's house? That is, did you ever room with him as his wife? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, say no more.
And she says, them is all the places I remember.
Those are the only places you remember?
Yes, sir.
Now, at the times you roomed with him, did you cohabit with him as his wife?
And she says, yes, sir.
And you never had any children? What is this?
Sorry. And she says, no, sir, I answered that question before and I told you no. Okay, so yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Do you have to go, Julia? What time do you have to go?
No, I'm good. I have at least 30 more minutes.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then a year later, on August 4th of 1893, Malissa Lott was interviewed by Joseph Smith III, and she affirmed that she was the prophet's wife in very deed. Do you want to do the same
As
thing?
if it isn't, as if she hasn't
Right.
made that clear. I wonder if he's going to ask her if she had kids. Anyway, question. Were you married to my father? This is Joseph Smith III, Joseph Smith's son. Right, yeah.
She says, yes, sir. Or she says, yes.
Was you a wife in very deed?
And then she says, yes.
Why was there no increase, say, in your case?
Through no fault of either of us, lack of proper conditions on my part, probably. Oh, she's blaming herself. Or it might be the wisdom of the Almighty that we should have none. The prophet was martyred 9 months after our marriage. So
yeah, that's pretty direct.
Lack of proper conditions.
Yeah, like what is she thinking? Her egg, like
she was stressed. I don't know.
she was
But
menstruating. Like I don't.
But I feel like a lot of Mormon women feel that way when they can't have kids. They feel like it's their fault. But anyway, I relate with that.
Quick comment from a viewer. Saipokivakapayas, that sounds Greek. If my ex-wife would have simply tolerated 1/100th of what Emma had to deal with, I'd be looked at as a marital hero. Sadly, I'm just another run-of-the-mill divorce-worthy apostate.
Oh.
Thanks for joining us. Sorry for that divorce. Thanks for the comment. All right, so that's I mean, again, how are the polygamy deniers going to deny that? And
She was lying.
And again, what's that?
They'll say she was lying.
Yeah, right.
I don't know why she would, but
And again, Malissa Lott falls in one of the ones that Brian Hales / the Mormon Church admits to.
There's no way they can deny that.
I don't think even Brian Hales could talk his way around that one.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right, let's go to
Nancy
Winchester.
So Nancy Winchester. So
Number
according to
32. This is number 32.
Okay. According to two church members, Orson Whitney and Nancy's friend Helen, Nancy Mariah was one of Joseph Smith's plural wives. Though there is no date for her marriage to Joseph, the best hypothesis is that the ceremony took place in 1843, since the last recorded plural marriage to Smith took place on November 2nd of 1843. If so, she became his wife at the age of 14 or 15. Nothing more is known of this union.
So that's just an insufficient information.
Right.
And
so
even if it was 1844, she was still 15 or 16.
Right.
And that doesn't make it much better.
No.
So this is the second 14-year-old.
Yes, second 14-year-old.
Okay. Along with
And Orson Whitney, he's one of the apostles. So I don't, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he has polygamy connections too, so.
It's just so creepy. Joseph's like, I have to have 30 wives. Let's pick 14-year-olds. Like, there's lots of women. There's lots of other women he could have picked, right? Why is he picking the 14-year-olds?
And why is he picking women who are already married? Like,
it makes no sense.
It's almost like he's just picking the ones he wants.
Yeah, the hot ones to him, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, 33, Fanny Murray.
Do one of you guys want to read this one?
Yeah, I'll go for it.
Okay.
Fanny Young, who was twice widowed, was one day discussing exaltation and celestial marriage with Joseph Smith and her brother Brigham Young. As Brigham tells the story, Fanny gave her opinion on the subject. Now, don't talk to me when I get into the celestial kingdom, if I ever do get there. I shall request the privilege of being a ministering angel. That is the labor that I wish to perform. I don't want any companion in that world, and if the Lord will make me a ministering angel, it is all I want. Joseph replied, Sister, you talk very foolishly. You do not know what you will want. He turned to her brother. She turned to her brother. Here, Brother Brigham, you seal this lady to me. After which Brigham Young married Smith to Fanny on the spot. Fanny was 6 days from turning 56 years old, while Joseph was 38. No evidence exists of sexual relations. I think she was actively against it.
Right. So, like this consent idea, she just said
Yeah.
no, and she can't say no to the prophet, or that's how I would,
Nonsense, Brigham, marry her to me now.
on the spot. Like, anyway, this, yeah. Yeah, so this is another widow. There doesn't seem to be, there's no reason for us to believe that she helped with other polygamous unions. But this whole story is wild to me.
I mean, this could be, if you were looking at the idea of dynastic things, right? You got a 56-year-old widow, but Brigham Young's an important figure and Joseph Smith wants to be dynastically sealed to her. Like, if that's what all of Joseph's polygamy was, I'd buy that argument. If it was all like the elderly widowed sisters of men he wanted to be close to, then you'd be like, and there's no evidence that he had sex with any of them, you're like, okay, cool, I can buy that. But again, it's like Dan Vogel said earlier, people try and take these exceptions and then make them the rule.
Right.
And,
but also, like, they were sealing men to men. He could have just sealed himself to Brigham.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, anyway.
Couple comments worth mentioning. Maven writes, polygamy necessarily starts creating competition for younger brides. Got to stake your claim before another man. And you could say that that's a really cynical view of Maven's, but we literally have quotes from general authorities later on in Utah complaining that certain men were given first dibs on the sex trafficked European immigrant women that were brought over. And they're basically saying, y'all, tell me if I'm wrong. It's like, hey, y'all are taking all the good looking ones. You need to give others of us a chance at the hot European immigrant women, right?
I believe some of the words were, it is not to be as it is heretofore been, or something like that. And then let us have a fair shake, I believe is also the phrase. Mm-hmm. And that is our friend Hebe C. Kimball, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
Who said that.
Yeah, so it's
stop taking all the hot ones.
Basically.
Spread the hot ones around, right?
Basically, like, stop marrying all the hot ones in England. Bring them here first, and then let us have a fair shake. Let's
have an auction. Maybe an auction would work. Maybe.
Oh my gosh! And John, you're categorizing that as human trafficking is absolutely what was happening. The Nauvoo expositor William Law talks about that. He's like, these women have no idea what they're doing. They're coming in from different countries, and they're being coerced into polygamy. So.
And Maven noted earlier that we should just remind everybody that we did an episode, called basically was Joseph Smith a sex trafficker? I think that was episode 1794, according to Maven. But I think he absolutely meets criteria.
Yes.
As a sex trafficker. And again, I know those are harsh words. Watch the episode and just look at if you just read the Nauvoo expositor, William Law, Joseph Smith's co-president or second in command, literally talks about these Scandinavian poor, impoverished, or British women that were shipped over in boats with missionaries in the UK and in Europe, lying, saying there is no polygamy. Then they ship these teenage European women over who are, teenagers. They get here to Nauvoo or wherever, not even speaking the language of English. And they're distributed to powerful Mormon leaders as their polygamous wives, not even speaking English, and they're poor. How can you not call that sex trafficking?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, Nemo, you're European, so you can reject, anything I'm saying.
Well, from the British perspective, there's less of the language barrier. Well, maybe there's still a language barrier, but it was very keenly felt by Brits for a long time that Mormons were coming over here, taking people away. There's newspaper articles all about it, people rejecting this idea. Once polygamy kind of came out and we realized that was what's going on, the missionary work in the UK went like this, right? As soon as it became clear what was going on in the Utah territories, people stopped going over in quite such with quite such abandon. So yeah, and then the Mormons have not had a good name ever since, because it was very clear that that's what was going on.
Somebody's asking me to put in the show notes the episode 1794. I'll paste the YouTube link here in the chat, and y'all are also free. Maven or Julia can add that to the show notes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Can we also just say real quick on the point of Heber C. Kimball, that quote, right, about it's not to be as it's been heretofore. I've just found it on Fair Latter-day Saints. It's from Stanley P. Hershon's book, The Lie of the Lord, and the full quote is, "Brethren, I want you to understand that it is not to be as it has been heretofore. The brother missionaries have been in the habit of picking out the prettiest women for themselves before they get here and bringing on the ugly ones for us. Hereafter, you have to bring them all here before taking any of them, and let us all have a fair shake." Fair Mormon's own defense is, the quote from Hershon gives no indication regarding who heard Kimball say this. They're not like he didn't say it. We're like, oh, we just don't know who heard him say it. Like, is that really your only defense of that? Well, I guess maybe that is the only defense they can mount against that quote, because it is pretty indefensible. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just found the Mormon Stories link as well, and I'll include it. Y'all can check that out. Since sex trafficking is such a popular topic these days. All right. Esther Dutcher, are we 2 away from finishing?
Yeah.
We're almost done.
Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Absolutely. Another wife that Todd Compton does not include in his book is Esther Dutcher. Her relationship with Joseph Smith is among the poorest documented of all his plural wives. Esther married her husband Albert in 1826. Only one late source exists, however. Since it came from a reliable source, we will include her. In a letter written by Daniel H. Wells to Joseph F. Smith on June 25, 1888, he explained that Esther's husband, he, Albert Smith, was also much afflicted with the loss of his first wife. It seems that she was sealed to Joseph the Prophet in the days of Nauvoo, though she still remained his wife, and afterwards nearly broke his heart by telling him of it and expressing her intention of adhering to that relationship. He, however, got to feeling better over it, and acting for Joseph, had her sealed to him and to himself for time. On the 3rd page of the letter, Daniel H. Wells also tells Joseph F. Smith that not long before her death, she committed adultery. The old gentleman is sadly grieved over this. Her husband was concerned that she would be destroyed for her crime, but hoped that her sealing to Joseph Smith would save her. While this letter does not point directly to any sexual relation that Esther Dutcher had with Joseph Smith, the heartbreak and secrecy could allude to sexuality in the extramarital relationship. I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's just like looking at the letter. It was really interesting. But yeah, so if it was simply a sealing with no sex involved, I'm not sure. I mean, you could say his heart could have been broken just because he won't be sealed to her in eternity, because he was only sealed to her for time. So that's why it's a solid maybe rather than a yes. But to me, that indicates that like it nearly broke his heart when she told him afterwards. Anyway, that seems to indicate that they were living as husband and wife. And then this idea later that she had an extramarital relationship with another gentleman. I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting thing that he added in the letter.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right. One more to go.
One more. So this is Mary Herron. So one of the wives that Todd Compton does not include in his book is also Mary Herron. Brian C. Hales, however, does include her. Mary Herron was married to John Snyder, and historian D. Michael Quinn also wrote about Joseph's relationships with Mary Herron. Quinn wrote, using a slang vulgarity for sexual intercourse, Mary Herron Snyder's son-in-law, Joseph E. Johnson, privately told a group of devout Mormons in 1850 he was familiar with the first frigging that was done in his house with his mother-in-law by Joseph. Johnson said this during a council meeting that was deciding whether to excommunicate him for impregnating one of Apostle Lorenzo Snow's plural wives, whom Johnson now wanted to marry. She loved him, not the apostle. A church court in Canesville, Iowa, had already decided that his priesthood was required to be laid down, i.e., he was disfellowshipped, until he came here to Salt Lake City. I cannot take seriously the suggestion by Hales that this church court's official minutes misquoted Johnson's words. First, by any reasonable logic, who would assume that any LDS clerk introduced a crudely sexual term into a non-sexual remark, or into a remark that only implied sex? Second, by 1850, the LDS Church clerks routinely used stenographic shorthand to accurately record such meetings, especially when Brigham Young participated, as he did in this one. So that's D. Michael Quinn's. He's kind of arguing with Hales there. He's saying that this looks exactly like what it says. This is implying sexual relations between the two of them. He's calling it a frigging, and why would they put that word in there if it wasn't?
And that's a slur. That word "frigging" is a slur.
Yes.
Okay.
Slang vulgarity for sexual intercourse.
In Britain today.
Well, yeah, it's it's a softer way of dropping the F-bomb.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, she's the last wife that I have listed. Of course, there's more that I didn't include because of the weak evidence, but she's coming from a really reliable source. So
if we share the list again, there it is.
Yeah.
So many Greens. The majority are Greens of the 35 wives, plural wives, not counting Emma. Over half, we've shown really good evidence that they were yeses on the sex. How many did we say Greens we have?
Oh, I have a slide
19.
where I sum them all up, but that's at the very end. Yeah.
Okay.
But this is why I didn't feel bad for being extra cautious and pushing back quite hard on them, because it's still 19 out of 35.
Right.
Well, really quickly, we have several. How are you doing on time, Julia?
I have a little bit left. Yeah.
How much?
Like 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to just go through some very quick comments because there's a lot of good comments here.
Yeah.
So Heather Rios Art writes, polyandry is a woman with multiple husbands, not a man marrying a woman who already has a husband. I don't totally understand the the difference there. She just says, I don't like the way everything centers the man as if women are just passive beings. I get that. So stop saying that the women are property of the men, I think is what she's trying to say there. And that's always fair.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that. Jessica Van Alstel writes, I've heard polygamy deniers explain away that these women's words by saying that Brigham Young must have pressured them to lie and he had so much power over them that they did it. So Jessica is basically saying the polygamy deniers say that Brigham was the starter of polygamy against Joseph's will, and so he forced however many women who were Joseph Smith's former wives and faithful, that as a prophet, he literally just forced them to lie under oath.
I'd believe it if there was any evidence of it. Sorry, Julia, go on.
Oh, no,
that's a good point.
I also want to plug in another episode that you did with RFM, where because people say, oh, Brigham Young made up D&C 132. But RFM looks at the novel expositor and he looks at the language there and he looks at the language of D&C 132 and how they match each other. They couldn't be talking about any other document except D&C 132. And because that was published in the paper that led to Joseph Smith's demise, that happened during Joseph Smith's lifetime. So I don't understand this idea that Brigham Young came up with it.
Surely we have the original manuscript for D&C 132 somewhere, right?
But it wasn't written by Joseph Smith. None of the revelations that we have, I'm pretty sure none of them are written in Joseph Smith's handwriting.
William Clayton. Was D&C 132 William Clayton's hand?
I don't remember which character was.
Dan will tell us.
Yeah.
All right. A couple others that are worth mentioning.
Clayton did 124 and 125, I know, off the top of the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Wild Notes of Sage says, I think one of the worst parts is Joseph Smith threatening that he'd die to the vulnerable teenage girls that he was trying to persuade or coerce to marry and have sex with him, threatening that he would die if they don't have sex with him and marry him. In modern day, we recognize threatening suicide in relationships as extreme abuse.
Very good point.
Well, I will say, though, that he's saying the angel would kill him. So it's not necessarily suicide in Joseph Smith's rhetoric with the angel with the sword. It's murder. I don't know how.
Yeah. But I mean.
But yeah, it's horrible.
Threatening that harm will come to you, whether you inflict it upon yourself or whether someone else does it, to get someone to do something is coercive.
Yes. Yeah.
Nemo, you need to know that Lee Rogers is concerned about the feelings of the Jimmy Dodgers because Lee Rogers says the Jimmy Dodgers are feeling slighted by the Doritos, and I think that's fair. Free the Jimmy Dodgers, Nemo. Free the Jimmy Dodgers.
Okay. They'll be back in force next episode.
Nox Dia Tacita writes, menstruation has little to do with maturity, in my opinion, but is a useful metric to understand when women and girls were likely to get married, as that was often a signal they were ready for marriage. Thank you for sharing that. I definitely can use all the education I can get on that stuff. Camille writes, I joined late, but was bigamy and polygamy illegal in the United States in those days?
I know this one.
Not just considered morally reprehensible, but were there actual laws against it? Nemo, how would you know? You're a Brit.
Oh yeah, but I just did a short on this, where essentially in 1833 there is a law against bigamy in the state of Illinois. It wasn't illegal in Ohio until much later. I think something like the 70s. Like for Ohio to officially make it illegal. But yeah, 1833 bigamy was illegal in the state of Illinois, and I can get you a source for that if you'd like.
No, it's for sure.
I've just done a short on it.
Has always been illegal in the United States from before Joseph Smith till now. It's still illegal, right?
Yeah. And it's now illegal just on a federal level. I think, from my puny British understanding, I believe that supersedes state law. Does it not?
Yeah, of course. Dan Vogel writes, some research suggests that menstruation starts earlier now for women than it did in the 19th century. I've heard that's tied to like dairy, hormones put in milk for cows, and how that might spur on early menstruation nowadays.
That's why you should all eat British food. British food's way better.
Y'all don't do hormones in your milk, Nemo?
Oh, funnily enough.
Oh my gosh, going to Scotland and England, the ingredients in the American food is ridiculous. Anyway, sorry.
I'm not looking forward to the amount of weight that I'm probably going to put on in the next couple of weeks when I'm in the States. Pray for me, everyone.
But while we're on that topic, Nemo, somebody asked if Nemo can do a U.S. tour. So they're not happy with you doing an event in Salt Lake and doing St. George Thrive. They want an entire tour. A U.S. tour. Like, it's kind of like 1964 all over again, right? It's like the British invasion is back.
Oh, dear. Okay, well, watch this space, I guess.
Are you going to come on the Ed Sullivan Show, Nemo? You probably don't get that reference. All right. Dan Vogel, we got to share his points. Dan Vogel says polygamy deniers can't just call these women who signed affidavits liars or who wrote in their journals or whatever. Thanks to the reorganized polygamy deniers for these affidavits. So, yeah, they were trying to disprove it. But by trying to disprove it, the RLDS Church helped give us important evidence to protect the truth, which is that Joseph Smith was a polygamist.
Yeah.
Dan Vogel says the married wives were for power over other men. That point's been made previously, but we always love Dan Vogel's blessing on any point being made. Dan Vogel also says Joseph Kingsbury's handwriting because he copied the original that was in Clayton's handwriting.
Okay.
So what? That's saying where DNC 132 came from?
Kingsbury. I think I remember that being said by Brian Buchanan on here as well.
And then, Dan Vogel says the original DNC 32 was burned by Emma.
Do not
because she
blame
was
her.
mad or because she wanted to hide it. Which one?
Oh.
Well, the polygamy dyers will say because she, wanted to hide it because she was in league with Brigham. I don't know, some nonsense. But yeah, she was mad. She probably threw it into the fire. Like, I do not accept this. That's the image I could see in my head.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, too bad it's all up in here. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and you got a couple more slides. We're almost done.
Yeah. So this to me is a really important section. I don't know how I don't know if any polygamy denier has addressed this topic at all. I'd be really curious if anyone knows the answer to that. So this is other evidence for sexual relations in polygamy and just general novu polygamy. So if
I agree that everyone needs to stay and listen to this final point because it's kind of, for me, groundbreaking.
Yeah. So Heber C. Kimball was married to Violet Kimball, or Violet Murray. I don't know how to say it. Violet and Violet. In November of 1822, Sarah Moon was Heber C. Kimball's first plural wife. She married Heber Chase Kimball, about 1842 in Nauvoo, Illinois, they had the following children. One, Adelbert or Adelman, his name is interchangeable, and he was born in 1842. Second, Henry Kimball, who was born in 1844. Then Sarah, and then another Heber. There's no record of Henry, the second child, going in the wagon train west. It is likely that he died before the family left for Utah. It is possible that Henry was not born until after Joseph Smith's death, but less likely that Joseph was unaware of Sarah's pregnancy by Heber. So this slide is saying that Heber C. Kimball entered into polygamy during Joseph Smith's life and had 2 children in polygamy. And again, nothing happened to Heber. He stayed an apostle. He was never punished for it. And I don't know how Joseph could have been unaware that this was happening, especially if we have stories of Joseph saying he's instructing men to take these women in polygamy. Anyway, I don't know how polygamy deniers, I don't know if they've addressed the actual existing children in polygamy in Nauvoo. So yeah, this is 2 children. And if we keep going, there's more.
Mhm.
Nemo, do you want to read this one?
Yep. William Clayton married Ruth Moon. Oh, the Moon family were.
Yeah.
Yeah. William Clayton married Ruth Moon on October the 9th, 1836. His first plural wife was Margaret Moon, Ruth's sister. According to William, it was Joseph Smith himself who arranged the marriage. Joseph said, "I give you authority to send for her, and I will furnish you with means," which he did. They were married on April 27th, 1843, and from what I could find, they had 6 children together.
And
Daniel Albert Clayton, Joseph Thomas Clayton, Lydia Arabella Clayton, James Leroy Clayton, Lavinia Tresilla Dunford, and Don Carlos Clayton.
So yeah, their first son was born February of 1844, which was months before Joseph was murdered. So there's a 3rd child in polygamy that William Clayton was never punished for this. Nothing happened. Nothing. No.
And just to really make this clear for anyone who's not following it, what we're saying is top Mormon church leaders who were assistants to Joseph Smith while he was alive in Nauvoo, who the church acknowledges were faithful leaders and that helped Joseph Smith in all he was doing. They were having sex with their polygamous wives while Joseph was alive, and they fathered children with their polygamous wives while Joseph was alive, obviously with Joseph Smith's approval, which blows away the stupid theory that Joseph was against it and Brigham Young was behind it afterwards, unless they want to believe that Heber C. Kimball and Daniel Clayton were having polygamous babies behind Joseph's back and Joseph didn't know.
Right. Joseph is either a big fool and he doesn't observe anything, or this is all his approval.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
And there's one more, right?
Oh, there's 2 more.
2 more. Okay, keep going.
So that was 3 children, and Joseph Bates Noble was married to Mary Adeline Beeman in 1834, and then in April of 1843, he married Sarah B. Alley as his first polygamous wife, and together they had 2 children. And the first one was George Omner Noble, who was also born in February of 1844. And then they had Ann Noble a few years later. So again, this is another child born in polygamy. Joseph Bates Noble was high up there. He married Joseph to Louisa, his 3rd plural wife. Like, nothing happened to him. He was never punished. In fact, I think he was made a bishop or a stake president or something. Like, it doesn't make sense that for polygamy deniers, I don't understand that.
Okay. And then there's one more.
So Reynolds Cahoon married Thurza Stills in 1810. Reynolds took Lucinda Roberts Johnson as his first polygamous wife sometime in late 1841 or early 1842. And together they had 3 children. And the first one is Lucinda Johnson Cahoon. And she was born in about 1843 and she died shortly after she was born. So again, there was 5 children born in polygamy that from other people outside of Joseph. They were in the polygamy circle. If they're having sex with their wives and having children, why would we think that Joseph is living a different kind of polygamy and not having sex with his wives, especially if the purpose of polygamy is to raise up seed, as it says in the Book of Mormon, as it says in the Doctrine and Covenants? It doesn't make, to deny that Joseph Smith was having sex in polygamy or living polygamy at all makes no sense.
Yeah.
And that I think I've written my question on the final slide. Do we have that?
Yeah. There's just really good comments coming in, so I don't want to give the final conclusion, but
That's all good.
okay, here's a you got a summary for us, Julia?
Oh yeah. So this is just like going through the ones that just counting up all the maybes, the yeses, and the nos. So underage brides, there was 2 total. Evidence for sexuality, only 1, with Helen Mar.
But that's 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other woman that we have very little evidence for anyway, or I shouldn't say woman, girl. And then women who are already married, there was 14. So you have 7 for yes, you have 3 maybes.
7 for yes sex, 3 maybes, and 4 no's. Yeah.
Right. And then widows, there's 4 total. And then there's 2 that were possible, and the 2 that we have no evidence for. And then single women, there's 17, including the underage. So 12 have evidence for sex, yes, 3 maybes, and then 2 no's.
That's over. This is a great slide, man. What a great slide. Everybody screenshot this slide and share it far and wide. And it, what a great work you've done, Julia, and also Nemo with your help.
Should put this on Instagram, John.
I mean, Nemo made the numbers less
He did.
less significant, but also maybe a tiny bit more credible.
Well, like if Joseph's having sex with 12 of them, with 14 women or whatever the number is, why not all of them? Like, I guess, yeah, I'm sure there are some he did not have sex with. These older women, like, that makes sense. But like, I don't know. I don't think it's necessary to push that he did not have sex with any of these women. I just think that's silly.
And any of the polyandrous women, even
Right.
that, right?
Right. And
Still
that's a lot.
50% of them.
Yes. Over 50.
Right? 50% of the underage
50%,
brides,
yeah,
50% of the women who are already married.
But it's worth saying that Brian Hales and Keith Erickson and the church, they all insist that there was no sexual polyandry, right?
I don't know why. I don't know why they say that.
But correct, right?
Yes.
They're totally in denial about this in spite of the evidence we've just presented.
Right.
Which is total motivated reasoning, ignoring or preferring other evidence to the evidence that's staring them right in their face. Here's the summary slide. Why would Joseph Smith practice polygamy differently than Heber C. Kimball, William Clayton, Joseph Bates, and Reynolds Cahoon? Yeah. And that's just a fantastic question to ask. Really quickly, let's just share a few final questions or comments, because there's so many good ones. Dan Vogel writes, DNC 132.7 gave Joseph Smith sole authority over polygamy, and the High Council could try those who practiced unauthorized polygamy.
See?
And that goes along with the comment that he made that only the polygamists who didn't have permission got excommunicated, and I'll add, were derided as engaging in spiritual wifery, right?
Like Bennett.
Right. And they brought men in and they excommunicated them. We have evidence for that. And so yes, Joseph is authorizing some, not authorizing others. So these 5 children born, he's clearly authorizing it because he's aware of other polygamy. Anyway, the polygamy deniers, the sex deniers don't make any sense. It does not match up with the evidence.
Gene from Latter-day Digest says, thanks, Julia, for all you do. Check out Gene's podcast. He interviews a lot of cool people. We love Gene. He's a great guy. Check out Latter-day Digest, and thanks for that comment. They love you. Gene loves you, Julia. How does that feel to be loved by Gene?
Yeah, Gene's great.
Samuel Pinson writes, the answer is that polygamy deniers claims that there was a conspiracy of polygamous church leaders who murdered Joseph Smith. Yeah, so this is where we are today. Not only did Joseph Smith never practice polygamy, but there was this cabal of aspiring polygamists that got together, including Brigham Young, right? And they murdered Joseph Smith. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, there's a whole TV show or movie called Who Murdered Joseph Smith. You can watch it for free. I've seen them combat it on other Mormon or ex-Mormon channels like Mormonism Live. Anyway, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Dan Vogel also says we shouldn't call it polyandry. We should call it pseudo polyandry because the women generally did not choose the husband. So that's a great point. Thanks, Dan Vogel. I love this point by Celeste Black. She writes, even if Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy, the next few prophets who famously did make it so it's still a major stain on the church. And that's a great point, Celeste Black. And that's something that, I mean, how in the world can the Mormon church still be true if Brigham Young staged a coup and him and the next 10 or whatever prophets all practice polygamy against God's will. How in the world could the God's one true church, where prophets are supposedly receiving daily revelations from Jesus, how would God and Jesus allow the next 10 or 12 prophets to all be polygamists against God's commandments, violating his law of chastity? Like nowadays, if you masturbate, you can be punished. God's going to be okay with his prophets having the, effectively, a coercive adultery as endowed members, and God's just going to give them all a pass. And it's God's one and only true church that's unique because it has prophets, and yet the prophets are defying God's holy law of chastity, and God doesn't strike them down or demote them or give them a revelation and say, cut this garbage out. Does that make any sense?
Nope.
Thunder Snow says fair, free the jammies. So Nemo, you've really upset people. Nemo, I just want to say you've really upset people by bringing Doritos to a Jammy Dodgers fight.
Wait until you see this, right? This is the sort of off-brand Jammy Dodgers I've been having to eat
Jammy
recently.
Wheels. That's
horrific, isn't it?
That's awful.
That's despicable. And then Rosemary says, Rosemary Bennett, along with many people, say thank you all for another excellent episode. Julia, you've done it again. You have created an episode that I think Mike of LDS Discussions would be proud of.
Aw, that's high praise.
Celeste says, OMG, I made John go on a rant. I'm so effing proud. She's frigging proud.
She's friggin' proud.
Celeste is friggin' proud. Yeah, the comments are coming in. Michelle says, very entertaining episode. Connie May says, I love you and your team. So fantastic. New Richard Jones says, excellent show today. Let me just say, thanks, Julia. Thanks, Nemo. Thanks to all the donors that make this possible. Please become a monthly donor at mormonstories.org. If you want to see this stuff continue, all you got to do is become a monthly donor, $10 a month, whatever you can afford. Also, please subscribe and like this channel, along with Nemo the Mormon and Analyzing Mormonism. And what's Hinckley's channel? The something Bishop? What
Bishop's
is it?
Interview.
What?
Bishop's Interview.
Bishop's Interview. And Jean's channel, which is
Latter Daily Digest.
And everyone else, Zelf on the Shelf, and all the other good people.
Everybody.
Check all the good things out. Thanks for supporting us. Maven in the comments, Gerardo, Brooklyn, everyone at the Open Stories Foundation, the board, and all the commenters. Aren't the commenters great?
Yeah, this has been fun. I'm glad we did this on live.
Yeah, and we had almost 1,000 people pretty much for most of the episode, so that's super fun.
And I imagine we'll have more viewers because I feel like this is a hot topic or whatever.
And this is just part one. We're going to do a part two where we literally respond to Brian Hales and all the garbage that Mormon apologists. We're going to respond to them directly.
Who knows? I might even be in studio for that one.
Ooh. Yeah, Nemo's coming. We may open up Nemo's event if we can find a bigger venue. Right now it seats 100. If we can find a bigger venue, we'll try and open up Nemo's event that may feature Samantha Shelley as well to more people. If y'all want to hang out with Nemo here in early March in Salt Lake City when Nemo's here, that's going to be really fun to have you again. Julia, any final comments?
No, I don't understand the people that deny Joseph Smith living polygamy. These are, and again, we've talked about this before. These are actual women who actually went through all of this. And this would have been really, really hard on every one of them. The books like Todd Compton, where he goes through each wife and he goes through their whole life, and he goes through the heartbreak that they go through, all the feelings of terror. And these are just real women with real experiences. And I encourage you guys all to look at their stories specifically. This is just a very watered down, we're just looking at the evidence, but these women have very important stories for themselves.
Check out Todd Compton's In Sacred Loneliness. Check out Dan Vogel's channel on Mormon Truth Claims. Subscribe to that as well. And even the Cultural Hall or Culch, he did a fun parody song about Joseph Smith called Story of a Guy that mentions a lot of stats about Joseph Smith's polygamy. Culch's work is not just brilliant, it's also fun and humorous. So subscribe to the Cultural Hall while you're checking out all this other stuff as well.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Nemo. Thanks, Julia. LDS Discussions lives on. Remember, everyone, that you can check out LDS Discussions as its own podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. You can view it as video on Spotify because now Spotify allows video. And you can also check it out on the LDS Discussions playlist on YouTube. You can watch it from start to finish, and we recommend that you do. That's it. Thanks for the show. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. We love you. Donate, support us, subscribe, and we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Please click the like button. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
We see you, Tim.
See you, everyone.